A very good morning to you. I am Daniel Wahome, and welcome to Sports Check on this Monday morning. It's the 3rd day of August 2020. It is a day when the Cabinet Secretary for the Interior, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, will be launching police digitalization, and this is at the Buruburu Police Station. And it is also the Wild Rangers Day. The men and women who do protect our wildlife are going to be celebrating their day at the KWS headquarters, and Cabinet Secretary Najib Balala is going to be overseeing that. Our nurses will be giving a briefing, and this is at the nurses complex at the Kenyatta National Hospital, and the Cabinet Secretary to the Treasury and Planning, Ambassador Ukuri Yatani, is going to be meeting with the senators and the Commission on Revenue Allocation on the stalemate about the division of revenue bill that is still stuck at the Senate. And also updates on the coronavirus situation in the country and from Nairobi, and also updates from our teams in Mombasa and Kisumu. Welcome to the program, and remember, it's also a Monday where we focus a lot on sport. We're going to be having 3 conversations. One, it will be about the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya and the changing laws that will come into force in the year 2021. We'll also be speaking to Lieutenant Colonel retired Nashon Randiek. He is the chair of the Kenya Hockey Union. He's going to be telling us about where the sport is and also some of the return to sport protocols that have been put out by the international federations and have been put into consideration in other countries. And also, Tiras Wayaki is going to be joining us and giving us a football analysis on the FA Cup final that he watched on KBC Channel 1, the finale of the Serie A, and FIFA releasing up to 1.5 billion shillings in relief to member associations around the world. Get into our conversations. Our Twitter handle is at KBC Channel 1. Mine is at Mr. Wahome, MISTAWA Home. The man at the bottom right of your screen is our sign language interpreter. His name is Simon Karoda. Let's get straight into our first conversation, and it is with the Bildad Rogoncho. He is the head of legal at the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya. And our conversation today mainly comes from changes that are going to be made. Over the past 2 or 3 weeks, the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya has been involved in a public participation process, and this has got to do with amendments to the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya Act, the regulations and the rules that govern the anti-doping fight in the country. And this was necessitated by changes to the water code. It's a process that has been going on for the last 4 years, and it takes effect on the 1st of January 2021. And we take this time to welcome Bildad Rogoncho. Bildad, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Alan.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for giving us the time so that we can share this and, also take a look at where the anti-doping fight is in the country. And let's start with the status of Kenya with the World Anti-Doping Agency. And this is after Kenya complied with the code in 2016. It had the bill actually had to go through Parliament twice. The first one was not accepted and the second was accepted. What has been the journey then been for the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya since, and the relationship with the World Anti-Doping Agency and other global bodies?
Thank you, Alme. Let me start by first saying that Kenya ratified the UNESCO Convention in 2005. And what essentially is that Kenya was now bound to international regulations on anti-doping. But it took about 11 years for the establishment of the agency. And as you've rightly put it, the first act was Act number 5 of 2016, which was amended to Act number 18 of 2016, essentially now creating the agency. And you know that the creation of the agency came as a result of the non-compliance by the WADA Rio Olympics. Wahome, a lot was done within a very short time. And in fact, I want to congratulate my CEO, Mr. Jafta Rugut, and my 2 directors, Madam Agnes Mandu and Madam Sarah Shibutse, for a stellar job that they did in putting together the agency. Hats off goes to Ambassador McDowell, the chairman of the board, and the unfettered support that he's always providing. Now, the WADA compliance is normally achieved 3 ways. The first one is to have the National Anti-Doping Organization accept the code. And secondly, after accepting the code, the National Anti-Doping Organization is expected to implement the code. And this is done by amending the rules and regulations to include the mandatory articles and the principles of the code. And finally, the National Anti-Doping Organization is expected to enforce the code. Now, WADA has been monitoring Kenya for a very long time. And this is normally done to ensure that the local legislation is drafted in line with the code, and also monitoring of the cases which arise in the country, with WADA reserving their right of appeal in these cases. Now, I must point out that questions and has been conducting even face-to-face audits. And I can declare that indeed Kenya is compliant to code and as per the international standards on code compliance by signatories. Wahome.
All right, and Bill, that let me move on to something, and this happened around 2017, 2018. The World Anti-Doping Agency and the Athletics Integrity Unit, they had an investigation, and this is mainly around athletics and how, Kenya was fighting. And the result was that Kenya, number one, does not have what can be called systemic doping, something that is sanctioned by the state or involved the state. It's just random, low tech to you, but still it was considered to be rampant. What has been the impact of that investigation on how the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya now deals with the education and also intelligence and investigations?
That report was quite unfortunate. But it was a reflection partly of the reality on the ground. Since that particular report, Kenya has remained on category A of the AIU watch list, and together with countries like Ethiopia and Morocco. Whether it was as a result of the number of positive tests that the country was receiving at the time, subject to discussion. But since that particular report, Kenya has continued to cooperate and collaborate with AIU on investigations. And the approach of the agency has since changed from random testing to intelligence-based testing. Wahome, I can tell you that the agency is now collaborating closely with the Director of Criminal Investigations and also the National Intelligence Service, and in order to basically revamp the investigations and the intelligence teams in the agency. And more importantly, for the agency to be able to achieve the required success, then these efforts have to be sustained. And we have to ensure that we have no other factors that affect the discharge of the mandate of the agency.
And now, that brings me now to another point, is that as Kenya was 2016, the IOC had put two countries on an extreme watch list. One was Russia, and the other was Kenya. And to use the words that were used then, the benefit of doubt on athletes were not there. But let's now get to Russia and the activities of Sochi 2014, where the head of the Russian anti-doping lab, Grigory Rodchenkov, eventually admitted and became the whistleblower as to how much tampering and interference with the anti-doping process was. And in effect, the World Anti-Doping Agency had to change its ways and the code. How did the WADA investigations on Sochi 2014 and the Russia scenario change the code and the long-term effects of the code that's going to come into effect in 2021?
Thank you, Ome. The Russia, if I may call it a fiasco, went on for a very long time. And you know very well that a lot of issues were raised, and so many countries were concerned with WADA's approach to what was happening in Russia. But ultimately, a report was prepared on Russia. Now it information which is in the public domain, that what happened in Russia was very systematic, and it was concluded to be government-sponsored doping. And there are no gray areas in that regard. Now, I want to juxtapose that particular position with what, or the investigation that we have alluded to earlier in 2017. Remember, the conclusion then was that Kenya's doping trends were more chaotic, uncoordinated, and ignorance-based doping. And before I go any further, we have heard of what I can call busybodies who have been calling for Kenya to be declared non-compliant by WADA. That scenario in Kenya is the same as the one that was happening in Russia. I think nothing can be further from the truth. Russia was investigated. A report was prepared by a renowned international professor, and WADA proceeded to hand the ban to Russia. But what effect did that investigation have on the new Code 2021? Well, Wahome, there is an emphasis now on institutional and operational independence of national anti-doping organizations. And WADA expects this to be done expressly in legislation, so that interference from external forces can actually be reduced. Now, is that the basis why we have the 2021 code coming into force on 1st of January 2021? Partly yes, partly no. Now, let me take you back to 2004. The fact that was the first time we had the WADA code. It was later amended in 2009, and that process was actually ratified in Spain, in Madrid. And we have the 2009 code. Then, come 2015, a new code came into place, which was ratified in Johannesburg. Now, the 2021 code, ratified in Poland. There are so many gaps that were identified in the 2015 code that necessitated the introduction of the Code 2021. And as you've seen, the code is amended every 6 years. At least you have a new code, because legislation has to be dynamic. We have to change with the times. We have to ensure that we are dynamic. Now, Wahome, it is important to mention that amendment of the code has always been a continuous process. And that even after the 2021 code, the amendment process for the next code will start almost immediately, with member states invited to give views on areas that have been identified to have gaps.
Well, and Builder, we are speaking with Builder Dragoncho. He's the head of legal at the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya, and it is about changes and the impact the changes of the WADA code will have even on our legislation. And Kenya, in effect, is now going to change the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya Act and the rules and regulations that apply to that. And over the past 2 weeks, the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya has been involved in a public participation process, collecting views from the public as is required by law. And Builder, you could briefly tell us about, the experiences and, without necessarily letting the cat out of the bag, the takeouts from the public participation process that came to a close last week.
Thank you. We engaged the public on it's a constitutional requirement on public participation in the legislative drafting processes. We have had a challenge, especially on stakeholder engagements. Of course, with the current pandemic, we were not able to have one-on-one meetings with our key stakeholders. But Wahome, we've been able to embrace technology, like what we are doing right now with you. And we engaged the key stakeholders on a meeting, which was actually presided by the Chief Administrative Officer of, Secretary of the Sports Ministry. And we received a lot of feedback. And one of the things that keeps on coming up is the issue of criminalization, and I expect you you definitely be asking me a question on that.
I will.
The cabinet has been talking about this for. So, one of the major issues that we have received the issue of criminalization of top country. Nonetheless, Wahome, we managed to put this document, because we are not only amending the Anti-Doping Act, but we are also we have received the new model rules, which will come into force on 1st January 2021 from WADA. So we are aligning the language in the rules and the act with our policy. We have identified some gaps in the policy. The same came into force in 2016. It is high time that we took it a little bit. The documents can be found on our website, and I want to invite members of the public to actually give us their feedback on the same. And we will definitely prepare a report on whether we consider them or not.
Now, let's come down to the Kenyan context and some of the things that will come through and has been put forward, if you look at the code and what it requires, is the emphasis on the National Anti-Doping Organization, in this case for Kenya, EDAC, putting more emphasis on education and monitoring. And this means that previously, from what has been made public and the information, 300 million a year. This may have to go up. The involvement in education and also the monitoring of how compliance with the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya Act, the regulations and the rules are. What does it mean?
Let me put it this way, that the three technical departments in the agency are education and research, standards and compliance, and legal. Education plays a very, very important role on matters anti-doping because it is the first port of call for athletes. Our aim is not necessarily to be able to arrest and charge athletes who have committed anti-doping rule violations. Our aim is to disseminate information and knowledge on anti-doping and ensure that athletes are not engaging in acts which they are not supposed to engage in. Now, the education department has worked tirelessly, and I can tell you for free that they have engaged in outreach programs, one, and from actually since the agency was set up, they've been able to have around 133 programs, reaching about 68,000 persons. They have also been engaged in education workshops. These workshops are normally target athletes in residential camps, training camps, coaches, federation officials, medical personnel, and even you, Wahome, as media personalities, are taken through these education workshops. And so far, the agency has held about 142 anti-doping education workshops, reaching about 11,513 persons to be specific. Now, there's something called the value-based education, and this is another approach that the education department is using to be able to disseminate knowledge on, anti-doping knowledge. The VBE program targets children or pupils and students who are below the age of 16 years. It is meant to basically impart the spirit of sport. And the values include things like honesty, teamwork, integrity, to name just a few. And so far, we've been able to have 25 programs, reaching about 3,062 students. Now, we are still holding discussions with KICD because we intend to integrate the VBE program into the Kenyan curricula so that at least these matters on anti-doping are imparted on our children at a very young age. Now, finally, Wahome, if you allow me,
Yes.
I want to mention a great achievement that was made by the agency recently. And this is the e-learning portal, which was launched by the Cabinet Secretary, Honorable Ambassador Amina Mohammed. And I want to give thanks to the board chairman, Ambassador Makdwalo, on a stellar job that they have done in ensuring the agency achieves this. Wahome, this e-learning portal can be found on our website. It is a portal which allows a user to be able to access, get to learn, and eventually take a test. And if you pass the test, you get a certificate. And it is a very, very good innovation, which was done by the education management. And I invite Kenyans to visit the website, www.adac.or.ke. Let them look at it. And it is a marvelous invention.
All right. Now, let's move on now to something else. And this is where it comes now to the entire process of, results management. And we've got to start, from the sample collection. And in the case of an adverse finding, an anti-doping rule violation, either through, the prohibited substance, you can have somebody who attempted to use. There are those who evade and refuse to submit a sample. We had a case in Kapsabet where somebody jumped out a window and over a fence, running away from a doping control officer. Things like tampering, trafficking, and complicity and prohibited association. How much is going to change effective 1st January 2021?
Come again, Mohammed. Come again. I didn't get you.
It's about the changes about the results management process, the entire process, from the sample collection, even how the planning is done for, sample collection, to the point where you do the adjudicatory process in the case of an adverse finding.
Yes. Thank you for that particular question. I think it is important that I first start with outlining the entire process for the benefit of the athletes, so that they're able to understand where we start and how we arrive at a decision. Now, as I've indicated earlier, we no longer conduct random testing. Our testing is intelligence-based. And as I've indicated, we are now collaborating with the Directorate of Criminal Investigations. And we are preparing reports which are able to help us create a distribution plan. This helps the Standards and Compliance Department pick samples or collect samples from athletes who have been targeted specifically. Now, what happens after the sample collection? It is important that I illustrate that the samples are twofold. There is urine and there is blood. And these samples are collected in a bottle, and this bottle cannot actually be broken. Once it has been closed, it cannot be broken. And it can only be opened in a lab. So they are transported to various labs. We have the labs that we've been working with. There's one in South Africa, and before I forget, Lancet Laboratory in Nairobi was approved. It's now a WADA-approved laboratory for conducting blood tests. So once the sample arrives at the lab, it is analyzed. And if the same results to an adverse finding, that particular information is posted on the ADAMS, and that is the an internet portal. It's an internet portal, to put it in layman's language, that helps the National Anti-Doping Organization receive this information and review the same. Now, once the information is received at the agency, it is taken through the initial review process. A team sits down to review that particular result and find out whether is there, for example, a therapeutic use exemption that the athlete had that exempts that athlete from being charged with an anti-doping rule violation. If there is none, then the matter now moves to the legal department, which will issue an anti-doping rule violation notice to the athlete. And the athlete is expected to respond to the same within 14 days. The response is reviewed, and if it is found to be unsatisfactory, a charge document is prepared and filed before the Sports Dispute Tribunal. I want to laud actually the Sports Dispute Tribunal because it has a pool of pro bono advocates who are normally now allocated these particular cases and who are able to contact the athletes and prepare a reply to the charge document. Thereafter, a hearing takes place and a decision is rendered. The athletes have a right of appeal. For the local athletes, or what we call the national level athletes, the appeals lie with the same Sports Dispute Tribunal, but they are heard by a different panel. For the international or the elite athletes, their appeals lie with the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Lausanne, Switzerland. And we've had a number of these cases. Now, once the appeal has been determined, then Mohammed, at this particular point, we are given by the court 21 days to make public that particular information.
So, let me come still onto the adjudicatory process, because this is going to change. And looking at the act that the draft number 3 of the act and the regulations, what we have realized is that people in sports science will not have to be included in the process. Now, reconstituting the SDT, the Sports Dispute Tribunal, is going to be a difficult process. But where do they come in? As expert witnesses, or in the side of the prosecuting side, which is the anti-doping agency, and on the defense side? How are they going to be incorporated now in the process?
To answer your question, Waume, I will need to go back and state exactly where the Sports Dispute Tribunal is anchored, and this is anchored on the Sports Act under Section 55. Waume, initially, the members of the Sports Dispute Tribunal were appointed by the Cabinet Secretary for Sports. Before all the tribunals were now roped back to the judiciary. And now the appointment of the members of the Sports Dispute Tribunal is done by the Judicial Service Commission. In fact, we, as an agency, we are very happy that the Honorable Chief Justice extended the term of the members of the SDT for a further 5 years. So at least this creates and gives us a bit of stability in that our cases can be able to be heard for the next 5 years without any changes to the membership therein. Now, whether we are going to have a sport or a scientist sitting as a member of the Sports Dispute Tribunal, let me put it this way, Homer, that the appointment of these members is done by the JSC, and our role as an agency is only to approach the JSC and advise on the need to have at least a medical doctor to sit in the Sports Dispute Tribunal. But does the absence of a scientist in the tribunal hamper the delivery of justice? And I will answer that with an emphatic no. The tribunal possesses judicial authority and can be able to summon expert witnesses. As a matter of fact, we have presented several professional opinions to the SDT to at least help them be able to make the best decisions. And I can tell you that the percentage of, or the number of cases that have been appealed from the SDT to CAS for the last, since actually the inception of the agency, there are less than 5, and we've handled for almost 150 of these cases. Now, before I forget, the tribunal has been lauded as one of the best systems that we can have in the anti-doping community, in that the tribunal is both operational and institutionally independent from the National Anti-Doping Organization. And this is a system that so many countries have tried to achieve, but to no avail. And I want to laud the current chairperson of the tribunal, Senior Counsel Ohaga, for an exemplary job that he is doing in steering that particular ship.
Now, let me move on to something. And the Athletics Integrity Unit, for example, they spoke to the authorities in Monaco, and they were given the power to announce provisional sanctions. And that's how we get to know if somebody is going to face that tribunal, for example, the whereabouts cases and the ABP. And the question is, when it comes to announcing provisional sanctions for the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya, because you don't cover just one sport, but you cut across board. The question is, where has a call for confidentiality versus public disclosure come out at this point? Because people want to know who's been provisionally suspended. Because if someone's missing in action for one reason or another, then the suspicion is there. So are we going to stay with confidentiality, or shall we have public disclosure?
When matters confidentiality are expressly provided in the rules. And results management authorities are not expected to announce or to publicly declare names of athletes who are still going through the results management processes. For one reason, that the athletes have a right to a fair hearing. And the athletes are presumed to be innocent until when the matter is adjudicated upon and a decision rendered, and even the appellate process is concluded. Wahome, you've rightly stated that AIU has been announcing athletes who have been provisionally suspended. This is as a result of concurrence, which was issued by WADA. And as an agency, we have not embarked on that particular route because we are aware of one particular and very essential element, that in the event that the athlete is able to prove their innocence, then where or how will their reputation be affected? Remember, most of these athletes depend, especially the elite athletes, depend on sponsorships. And the moment you taint somebody's image that they were charged with an anti-doping rule violation, whether it was, whether they were found not culpable or not, reputation is key. And I can tell you, Wahome, that as an agency, not anytime soon will you hear us announcing the names of athletes who have been provisionally suspended. I know media houses are very good at sniffing out some of these names, but sometimes they can be very displaced.
Okay, yeah, I know we've sniffed a couple in the process, but let's move on to some other matter now. The protection of minors. So how does this come into play? I'm going to use a Kenyan scenario. Angela Munguti was sanctioned by after participating at the Youth Olympics in Argentina in 2018. But the question was, at that time she was 17, and the question is, then she cannot easily call for right of representation in as much as she accepted the charge. And also something that we witnessed last year, Jamaican teenager Brianna Williams, she missed the World Championships in Doha, but her case was handled by the Jamaican authorities and the Jamaican Athletics Association. So how do you deal with the case of minors? Because she can't sign a contract, and that means that in the process, at times, a guardian, a coach, or what is referred to as athlete support personnel may also have to bear part of the responsibility.
The issue of protection of minors is a very important factor, an issue under the anti-doping rules. It is captured expressly under Rule 14.3 of the rules. But I would invite you and other members of the public to look at those rules and look at that particular provision, and you'll find that there's a rider to it. And the rider is that even though that information should not be disclosed to the public on the basis that the athlete is a minor, it will depend on the circumstances. And I want to quote exactly the case that you have just quoted, the case of Angela Munguti. Angela Munguti participated in a major international event as a minor. Angela Munguti went through the doping control processes. And Angela Munguti tested positive of norandosterone.
Yes.
I want to repeat, norandosterone. Now, norandosterone is a non-specified substance, which in itself, Wahome should tell you that was a very serious offense. And that is the basis why that particular information was disclosed to the public. Whether the athlete support personnel should have been included will depend on the kind of information that this particular gives to the Results Management Authority. Remember, we have an element of substantial assistance. And the moment the minor is able to disclose exactly how that particular substance found its way into her system, that matter would have been handled a bit differently.
Now, let me come to something else, and the extended use of anti-doping samples, blood and urine now, for DNA genomics, testing how you are resistant to diseases or basically how your metabolism works, and other studies, like how biologically feminine a woman is, like the case of Caster Semenya. What's the reaction to this? Because previously, these samples were used basically to check for anti-doping rule violations. Now, the science is being spread.
Wahome, let me be very categorical on that particular issue. The Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya, in their testing and sample collection and testing processes, do not test for DNA. And secondly, we do not either engage in genomic studies. The only thing that we have started doing as an agency, and this is contained in our doping control form, is that we seek the athletes' consent to conduct further scientific studies. And I want to give you a very good example. We now, and currently, I am conducting a matter on athlete biological passport finding. And this is as a result of the further scientific study that has been undertaken. As an agency, we have contracted the Athlete Passport Management Unit in Norway, because basically we lack the capacity to conduct such analysis. It is a very sophisticated way of analysis. And this it is not a one-off analysis. It is an analysis that can take years to be able to arrive at a conclusion. And basically what happens is that the lab will be looking out for any changes in the blood samples that are collected from the athletes. If there is any abnormal or unexplained spikes, then that will definitely lead to a charge. Well, let me put it that doping is evolving. From the Lance Armstrong case up to date, unscrupulous characters will always find new ways of cheating. And for us to be able to be at par, if not ahead of them, our systems have to change. And that is why we are now engaging APMU to conduct these further studies and embrace basically technology and sophistication so that at least we can be able to control what is happening with the athletes.
Now, finally, the one that everyone's talking about, criminalizing of doping. And Now, there are different arguments being given. Double jeopardy,
Yes.
a case of somebody being punished twice for the same offense. Germany is another country that had decided to take the route of criminalizing doping, but they went easy on it. But in
Yes.
cases where you have fraud or perjury, I know there is a case in Eldoret where somebody was caught having, with fraudulent documents from a hospital in Eldoret. But I would like to refer to cases of cooperating persons. I'll use the case of Ferdinand Omanyala, where a coach and a doctor was sanctioned for being privy to it. And
Yes.
the case of perjury, we've had the case of perjury, like the case of Jemima Sumgong. How do you balance between the cases, double jeopardy, cooperating persons, and those who have outrightly broken the law?
Okay. Just to clarify, if, and I'm using the word if, Kenya was to adopt criminalization of doping, double jeopardy will not lie. On the basis that these athletes will not be taken to the tribunal anymore. If it will be the criminal process, then it will be the criminal process and the criminal process alone. So double jeopardy will not lie. At this instant, yes, we are not able to charge them for anti-doping rule violations in the mainstream courts, that is. And this is because under the rules, it provides for these particular processes and removes expressly the mainstream courts. But Wahome, we have Section 42, and you've just mentioned about the matter in Eldoret. We have Section 42 of the Act that stipulates those offenses which an athlete can actually be charged with. And one of them is what you have actually stated. Now, criminalization of doping in the country. One, I can tell you for free that we have proponents and opponents of the same. The proponents are taking the cases of Italy, France, Austria, and of course, Germany are also weighing their way towards that particular direction. Especially in Italy, it has been hailed as a success because at one time, Italy positive cases were quite a number. But after the criminalization, this number of cases actually went down. Now, the opponents to criminalization of doping will tell you that the process of charging an athlete in the criminal court will change the standard of proof, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. Unlike now, when it is just on a standard of, a balance of probability, and also basically to the comfortable satisfaction of the hearing panel. What that means, it will complicate how this matter will be adjudicated upon. Wahome, also looking at an athlete's career, it spans up to the age of about 35 years. Anything beyond that is, I don't know, a bit of luck, I don't know. But by 35 years old, most athletes are looking at retirement. And opponents to criminalization of doping will tell you that, hey, if you ban this person for only 4 years, and this person is age 26 or 27, you basically removed a very big time of which this person would have actually participated in sport. Now, I want to give you an example of what happened in the UK. The government there set up a panel, a committee to look at criminalization. And a report was prepared, and it is in the public domain. And they gave a verdict of non-criminalization. In the country right now, and you've heard our cabinet secretary talk about this, and what is happening right now is that a panel of experts, both local and international, are going to come together, look at the pros and cons of criminalizing doping in the country, prepare a report, And thereafter, as an agency, we are ready to implement whatever that the Kenyans will say on this matter.
All right. That is Builder Drogoncho. He is the head of legal at the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya. Thank you very much for your time this morning and your insights into the anti-doping fight. And I want to give you a moment to give a closing word about what federations should know. And in studio, we've got a chair of one of the sporting federations, the Kenya Hockey Union, Lieutenant Colonel Nashon Randiek. He's here and he's watching. What's a message you want to pass to athletes and federations that as we get to the year 2021?
To the athletes, there is a rumor that is being bandied around that other corporations have been downscaled. I want to state it categorically that ADAC continues to operate at normal levels. We are adhering to the MOH and also WADA regulations and guidelines during this pandemic. And the testing is ongoing, education is ongoing through various platforms, including Zoom and Microsoft Teams. And no athlete should mislead himself or herself that we are not doing anything. To the federations, the code requires the federations to comply. We have undertaken about 9 compliance audits on federations. And we are happy with the status, but we have 1 or 2 federations that are still lagging behind. And we want to encourage them that it is high time they put their house in order, or else, and as per what is provided for under the Act and the regulations, we have the liberty to move the sports registrar to deregister them. And they should take this very seriously, that there is no time. The 2021 code is coming, and we should all be towing the line. Thank you very much, Wahome.
All right, you're welcome, Builder Drogoncho. He's head of legal at the Anti-Doping Agency of Kenya, speaking to us via Zoom from the agency offices in Nairobi. Updates on the Anti-Doping Act and the implications, and also the judicial processes and what everyone must know. The Anti-Doping Agency will be cracking its whip. Thank you very much. Well, we'll be getting to our next conversation in a short while, and we're joined by Lieutenant Colonel retired Nashon Randiek. He is the chair of the Kenya Hockey Union. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me this morning.
Yes. Before we get into matters hockey first, I know you followed up, you've been following the interview we've had with Bildad. Your take out from what he has said and where the Kenya Hockey Union stands as far as the anti-doping fight is concerned.
First of all, I would like to commend him for the information he's given out to the public, to the athletes, and to the federations. And what I would like to say is that Kenya Hockey Union is one of those federations which have complied with the requirements of ADAC. We have worked very closely with them, and as we speak, last week, 2 of my hockey players actually are under the telescope of ADAC. How did I know that? Because they called me asking for their telephone numbers and their clubs and their whereabouts. So I know that they are being monitored and they'll be tested. And we see nothing wrong, and we are going to cooperate as much as we can do it.
All right. Colonel Randiek will be coming in a short while as we get into a conversation about hockey and return to play, because it turns out it's going to be a very expensive venture for hockey to get back.
Definitely.
All right. After this short break, Lieutenant Colonel retired Nashon Randiek, chair of the Kenya Hockey Union, tells us about return to play for the sport in Kenya.
Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
Mommy, wake up. I'm going to be late. I'll go to school by myself.
You came to my house and took her. Serious, Wangoi? Chiki. You should be thanking me, not attacking me.
I'm here for consultation.
Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
Aunt, something horrible happened.
Don't scare me. What happened?
Jorge and Andrea found a tape where my parents named Juana as the insurance beneficiary, but now the tape is missing. I'm on the verge of losing my mind. I need to speak with you. Are you alone?
Juana, do you trust Julio?
Andrea entrusted it to me for safekeeping until we could bring it to Mr. Pedro. They're going to lose that money because of me. I feel awful.
In love with Ramon.
Every Monday evening, we take you back where the action happened.
We cheer up your Monday blues.
Our cameras rove all week to cover the latest in the enormous showbiz scene.
We show you what you missed even if you were present.
Grapevine gives 100% support to the local entertainment content.
From celebrity buzz,
music,
fashion,
and all manner of entertainment and youth talent.
watch Grapevine every Monday at 10 p.m.
Remember what they say, if you did not see it on Grapevine, then it most probably
it never happened.
What you gotta do.
Welcome back to Sports Check on this Monday morning. It's the 3rd day of August 2020. I am Daniel Wahome. We continue with our conversations around sport, and this time round we'll be speaking hockey with Lieutenant Colonel retired Nation Randiek. He's the chair of the Kenya Hockey Union, and it's about the return to play protocols. Our sign language interpreter, there is a change of guard there, is Susan Thuku. Before we had Simon Karutha. Now, let's get straight into our conversation with Colonel. And first, one of the things is the Kenya Hockey Union in March, around the 16th of March, when the Cabinet Secretary for Sport, Ambassador Amina Mohammed, gave directions about the cessation of sporting activities until the situation was contained. It's now coming down to about 5 months. What for the Kenya Hockey Union? What was the impact, especially for the season 2020?
It was very demoralizing to the teams, and taking into consideration that some of these players and officials actually depend on the sport as a earning. So by putting off hockey activities, that meant even their livelihood was actually cut off, and it is disastrous. We've tried to assist them by handing out food hampers, but it is very expensive.
And at the moment now is that the International Hockey Federation, the FIH, has put together regulations that are going to be used, and these are the return to play and the phases that are involved. Some countries have already started implementing them. Think of New Zealand, think of Canada, and also countries in Europe that are reopening. The first of them were the stay-at-home orders in place and the closure of the training facilities. This is the first phase. What is the protocol that the KHU has put in for the people who play field hockey?
Actually, what we did is when these regulations came out, they were actually sent to Africa Hockey Federation, and the same were forwarded to Kenya Hockey Union. And we complied 100%. And we are going to comply with each of those requirements to the latter. But what you should also note is that they are very friendly, and it depends on the level of play. At a higher level, there are more requirements and they are more serious. At our level, they are very friendly.
So what have been the players doing, the men and the women who always grace City Park?
We have encouraged players to actually carry on individual training, that is keeping fit, skill training, and also keeping interacting through virtual meetings.
And this comes to, the stay-at-home orders, a point at which, the relaxation is there. I know group activities are not there. There is also the Cabinet Secretary who put together a task force on return to play, includes our Managing Director, Dr. Naim Bilal. So the first thing that when you look at what the FIH has done and sent out to the Africa Hockey Federation and down to the Kenya Hockey Union, let's start with what is required when, if you're to instruct the coaches about handling things, because looking at it is limiting groups to training of 10 or less. How does this, impact on the sport itself?
First of all, I'd like to mention that we were part of that committee, which was actually set by Honorable Ambassador Amina Mohammed.
Yes.
And we gave our recommendations alongside other federations. And as you've mentioned earlier, it's going to be a very expensive venture going back to the field, because we have to meet the requirements. There are no shortcuts. First of all, we have to identify the grounds. Good enough, we have our national stadium, which is well taken care of, because we fumigate twice a week as we speak. But
that is the City Park Stadium.
That is City Park Hockey Stadium. We have to, we don't have to identify other playing fields, because we have our playing fields are known and they are already marked. It is unfortunate that some of the majority of them are schools and university grounds. So we have to negotiate with the Ministry of Education, because as it is, they are not allowing any training to take place, or if we are to go back, then we have to agree on the terms that we are going to use. But we have to ensure that the conditions which are supposed to be met are met at our expense, not at their expense.
So let's start with this, because this start with a simple thing.
Yeah.
Hockey is played, you've got the stick and you've got the ball. So what does it come down to when it comes to this personal equipment?
Personal equipment, first of all, there'll be no sharing. And then frequent, fumigation of the equipment used. And then things like the ball. You see, the ball is shared. So that one has to, we will follow what FIFA is doing. You can see the federations that have gone back to the field in Europe, what they do as pertains to the ball. That one we don't have to invent anything new, because it's already there. We can see what they are doing. We are going to follow suit. For the hockey stick, if Wahome, you have a stick, that stick will be yours. It will not be shared. And we are going to make sure that it is fumigated as required.
And the protective equipment for goalkeepers and the shin guards, or mouth guards, and the masks that are used when you're taking the penalty corners.
Now that is another issue. Now the personal equipment, like the goalkeepers, it becomes personal, and it will not be shared. Likewise, when you are taking penalty corners, it will have to become personal. It will no longer be shared the way we used to share, because we only used to have 5, and they used to be thrown behind the goalpost, And when a penalty corner occurred, people just rush back, but now that will not be the case. It will have to be personal.
Now, hockey has been identified as a level 2 threat sport in terms of risk when it comes to infection. So there's level 1, which are high risk. I would put rugby at that. Level 2, this is things like football and what else would I include? Maybe football, yes, and hockey, where at times there may be incidental physical contact. And level 3, something like that, where you can even play at home alone, which is low risk.
Lawn tennis.
And lawn tennis.
Yeah.
So as a level 2 sport, what are you required to do when play resumes?
When play resumes, first and foremost, we have to fumigate our grounds. We have to make sure that the changing rooms are fumigated, they are well ventilated. We have to make sure that the hand washing points are there, conspicuous. And then we have to make sure that, because when you have 3 or 4 games on the same venue, you have to make sure that this facility is fumigated after every game. When you go to the technical bench, you must make sure that the social distancing is observed.
Which means that I'm trying to imagine in terms of City Park, where the technical benches are directly opposite, the main stand. That means now the players will have their own zoned out area within the stands.
Definitely, they will. And then the other issue which is giving us a headache is the control of spectators. And depending on what the ministerial committee will come up with, we suspect that we might have to play on empty stadiums, because as it is, most of the clubs never take responsibility of their supporters' actions. So it will be very difficult to control supporters.
Now, the other one comes, and this is where I would like to consider dressing rooms. How are these going to be managed if you're going to have 3 matches a day at one venue?
The simple thing is to have them fumigated after every game, cleaned and fumigated.
And in terms of that, we know we can have about 4 or 5 matches a day, going even under lights. What's the implication about the number of matches that now the union can have, say, for example, on a Saturday at City Park now, given the kind of work that is required and trying to stick to, the standard breaks in between each period of a game?
About 4 games a day.
Maximum. Down from around 6.
Yes. Because now we need a lot of time, to do the cleaning and ensuring that the protocol is put in place. So it will eat into the time.
The other one that's coming in, and we've observed a lot, especially where sport has been called, is that there's going to be, it's going to be targeted testing of the sports persons. How is this being considered? Because it costs anything from 5,000 to 15,000 shillings for a single COVID test. About how many would be required before players now are allowed to be fully active in the sport and mitigating this cost?
You see, when we had our meeting with the ministerial committee, this issue came up, and we made it very clear that we are going to need financial assistance, or maybe the department will have to work with the Ministry of Health to see how we can be assisted, because it's a very expensive venture. And as it is, we've lost a lot of revenue.
Yes.
And by the time we go back, I don't see us recovering. So it's going to be difficult, and I think we have to agree on how we are going to deal with that aspect.
And it also brings in something else, is that when teams travel, they do work as a team. Then in this case, when you're doing the pre-arrival tests, what kind of protocols have you ensured? Should somebody, and sadly, test positive for that, and they've got to isolate, what are the protocols? Are you going to have a place where this athlete may be, or is it going to be specifically at home?
Specifically at home. And when we run the test, you see, the test is not going to be run at the stadium. You see, because we had some associations which were talking about isolating their players from the public, so that if your tournament is running for 3 weeks, you find a venue and actually you get your athletes tested, and you actually stay with them for 3 weeks. You run your tournament. Once it's over, then they can now go back. But that is also a very expensive venture. But for us, is that random testing. They'll be tested. Whoever is positive, then I think it will be, depending on the level of seriousness also, whether they require admission or whether they can do it at home, then we would prefer self-isolation at home.
And this brings in another thing, an ordinary hockey game. Looking at the number of players, so you've got 2 teams, you've got the umpires and everybody, the number of people that will be required to effectively run a hockey game as per the laws of the sport.
As it is now, our team is made up of 18 players. So 18 times 2.
That's 36.
That is 36. Then you have the element of the technical bench, which is about 5 per team.
So that comes now to
That's
10.
another 10.
46 people.
That is 46. Then now you have the technical officials. That comes to about 4.
We are now down to 50.
That's about 50. So also it will depend on the situation at the time we go back. Will we have attained the peak? You see, will the spike still be on, or will the numbers be now going down? I think that will also determine how we are going to react to what you've asked. But what I will mention at this point in time, if we are to go, we have to go back, and the situation is still, not very encouraging. There's another format of hockey, what we call hockey fives.
Aha. What's played at the Youth Olympics.
Which is played at the Youth Olympics. There'll be no harm adopting that format. That format needs 9 players a team. So times 2, that is 18. You can see...
You've actually cut the number of people at that point by half.
By half. So if need be, then we'll adopt hockey 5.
And there are also considerations, especially when it comes to the match officials, the umpires. So the considerations that have been put here is that, for example, some of those being suggested, don't touch the ball, minimum 6 feet distance, or just call it 2 meters. And, the use of the electronic whistle and radios as follows. How is this, being planned for the match officials?
You see, that one, for them, it's not difficult, and it will not be costly. When you're told don't touch the ball, even now we encourage them not to touch the ball. So that one is not an issue. A whistle, whether it's the normal one or it is what is being recommended, it is personal, so it's yours. And we don't encourage sharing of whistles, even from before. Mm-hmm. So that one should not be an issue. Keeping the 2 meters, that one, we always encourage the technical officials to don't come too close to the to play. Keep your
the hockey
distance.
Stick is actually an extension of the arm.
Yes, keep your distance. Even when there's a contention, always urge the players to keep their distance in a normal situation. So now it is in a demanded situation. So it will just be made very clear to them.
And how swift do these officials have to be? Because this is a demanded situation, and keeping up with play and look, there's always, people will always talk about, the line of sight and how the umpires are placed at the different ends of the pitch. How much of fitness will you require as a federation for the match officials?
Normal.
The
normal. Standard. What is required now is what will be required then. because we have frequent testing. The umpires are tested, and they have to maintain that level of fitness for them to be used in the different levels of play. So that one will not go down. Going up is not a problem, but it is manageable. And if now the main thing is to keep away from play. So even if it means keeping off, the field most of the time, you only go in when the ball is on the other side. If that is necessary, then we'll have to adopt that. But as we talk, when the ball is closer to the line, most of the umpires are always off the ground. So, and no player is going to go off the ground to play. So that distance is automatically maintained.
Now, the other question that comes in now is bringing in these protocols. We know the school year is done, is now taking the protocols to institutional sides, schools and universities. What's the work being done to ensure that this is, the information is passed and these regulations are known? Because it now becomes crazier, given that the schools play either on a surface that's grass or marram.
We also play on grass and marram.
Yes.
So, and then when you talk about universities, half our teams in our leagues belong to universities, and they belong to county associations. So, as the union, we will actually be dealing with the county associations, and we will be telling the counties that these are the protocols on the table, they must be complied with. So can you tell all your affiliates, most of which are the universities, that this is what they have to comply with? And when we are talking to the county associations, we are going to copy that information directly to the universities. So there is no element of miscommunication in between. But it's going to be difficult, because what we are doing at the City Park is what the clubs will be doing at their training grounds, and is what the universities will be doing at their campuses.
And now that you've mentioned, is that competitive hockey may go back. If the numbers are restricted, you go down to Hockey 5. Let's now speak about Hockey 5 and its effectiveness at a period like this as a format of return to play.
It is very effective. One, it's cheaper because you are dealing with 9 players, and at any given time, only 5 on the pitch. So even when it comes to transporting, these players to the counties, it is cheaper. When it comes to accommodation and feeding them, it's cheaper. When it comes to random testing, it is cheaper. When it comes to, providing the fumigation, requirements for their equipment, it is cheaper. Simply the numbers go down, the cost of maintaining them also goes down.
And if you have a situation, for example, if somebody has got 2 hockey pitches within themselves, what considerations would you give to, for example, have 2 matches being played simultaneously, 2 Hockey 5 matches being played simultaneously?
Yes, that one is an option, and it's a shorter version where you don't play as much as in the normal 11-a-side. So where you are playing 1 11-a-side, you will actually be playing 4 Hockey 5 games. So you see, even the period is shorter.
Just the simple dimensions of that Hockey 5 pitch.
Okay, if I can describe it to you in terms that you will not confuse yourself, or it will be easier to get it, is take the normal ground and divide it into 4. Yeah. So those are 4 grounds.
Yes.
It will be reduced to 2 because you need to put the boundary boards. So because you'll not be able to put the boundary boards and leave the runoff area and then still get 4. So you can comfortably get 2 out of that. And if you have 2 grounds side by side, then you can easily get 4.
And that means that for you, because everyone, especially for us, I mean, even in the media, we miss going out and getting the restrictions. What are the regulations that you will require for third-party people? You will need medical staff, given the nature of the sport. Somebody may fall, or the clash of sticks, which is I know is heavily discouraged. Then you may have people who are doing security, and in terms of coverage, you may have media people. What are the requirements that will be required by the Kenya Hockey Union for third-party persons who may come to cover your events?
First and foremost, they have to comply, to the protocols in place. So if it is wash handing, they have to wash their hands. If it is sanitizing, they have to sanitize. If it is observing social distancing, they have to do that. For the medical personnel, if they have to wear PPEs, they have to wear. They will have to, actually, not if they have to. They have to, because for them, they'll be going in when there is a sort of injury, and they have to deal with these players at a very close quarter. So they have to be in PPEs. That expense, for things like PPEs, will actually be shared between the union and the clubs. But for things like hand washing points, for the temperature gun, for the sanitizers, the cost for that will actually be borne by Kenya Hockey Union.
And at the end of it all, it has been allowed, and we've seen, for example, FIFA last week, the Bureau of the FIFA Council did make an announcement. They're going to be they've put a relief fund of up to $1.5 billion for the sport. How much support are you getting, from the International Federation downwards, so that to mitigate the cost of, returning to play, given the kind of protocols that we have?
I know many will not believe me, but it is zero. You see, football is professional. Hockey is 100% amateur. And we don't get any financial support, either from Africa Hockey Federation or from International Hockey Federation. We don't.
So that means you have to now get into your own coffers and also look at funding that may have been coming through the State Department for Sports.
Of course, because the State Department for Sports is our mother and it's our father. So we will have to go back to them and see how they can assist for us to ensure that we go back to the field, enjoy the game of hockey, and have all the protocols put in place so that it can happen.
And in this case, what's going to be the way to bring back, the funding for the game, through sponsorships and other commercial avenues to generate the revenues that may be required to run this? For example, buying sanitizers. If a 500 ml bottle is going for 600 shillings, then we're trying to count how many you would need per day to effectively run a game.
And that's a headache as we speak. And we do hope that when we go back to the ground, when we approach, some corporate or some well-wishers who actually produce whatever we are looking for, they will be willing to actually donate or give them to us at a subsidized rates.
And the one thing that I like asking every federation official at the moment is that it has been a time to reflect at the state of the game in the country, look at where you stand in terms of the sport itself, the governance and engagement to the public. Over this time, what is it that at the Kenya Hockey Union, Colonel, you've been able to look at and said, this is the direction we want to take when everything, like they say, the new normal is in place.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that the new normal is there to live with us. And I don't see ourselves going back to the old normal. So, one, we have to exercise the highest degree of accountability. You see, because as it is, we never used to have enough finances. So the little that we have must be managed properly. So when we talk about governance, there is no room for,
hanky-panky things
at all. We have to manage, and you know that very many people will be looking at us, and there'll be no excuse, and the clubs will be coming to us. Like we require clubs to pay subs, and most of these clubs will not be able to pay subs. Most of the universities, looking at them, if there is no school fees coming in, do you think they'll be able to pay their subs? They will not. So that means that is lost revenue. So, and that means accountability must be 110%. When we talk about governance, all the officials must live up to the expectation.
You must be more prudent than Caesar's wife.
That is more than true, you see.
In terms of the state of the game in the country?
We've been hit, and nothing like this has ever happened. Now, because we are likely to go back, and there were qualifications that we were supposed to be party to, like the Northeast, Africa qualifications were supposed to have taken place this year in May. They were postponed. So they are likely to take place next year in February. So you see, you can't wait until everything, gets back to almost normal, and then you assemble a team and start training it. No, we have to start training the team now. We have to, because we had already selected a team. We had already selected the technical bench. So, and they have been communicating. The coaches have been telling the players what to do. And the players have been trying to maintain whatever they are told to do, and they've been reporting back to the technical bench. It is a new concept. It requires a lot of discipline. And it's sorry to mention that discipline is something that we lack in Africa and by extension to Kenya. So, but it is the new normal, and we have to go that way.
Lieutenant Colonel retired Nation Randieki is the chair of the Kenya Hockey Union. With the return to play protocols that have been there, he's explained the option of Hockey 5, a shorter version of it. Think of 3-on-3 basketball, but this time it's hockey, and we want to see how that is going to go down. We will be moving on to a discussion about football with Tiras Wayakituku. The KBC did broadcast to you the FA Cup final. Arsenal 2-1 winners over Chelsea. That was on Saturday night. The Serie A came to a close yesterday, and like I mentioned, $1.5 billion of a relief fund to 210 member associations of FIFA. Colonel Randiek, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure hosting you this morning.
Thank you very much.
When we get back, Tiras Wayakituku, he's back to this hot table that he graced for quite some time. Let's talk football next.
Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
Mommy, wake up. I'm going to be late. I'll go to school by myself.
Angalia ni nani nimekutana naye akijipeleka shuleni.
You came to my house and took her. Are you serious, Wangoi? Chiki. You should be thanking me, not attacking me.
Unanipa favor moja. I'm here for consultation.
Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
Aunt, something horrible happened.
Don't scare me. What happened?
Jorge and Andrea found a tape where my parents named Juana as the insurance beneficiary, but now the tape is missing. I'm on the verge of losing my mind. I need to speak with you. Are you alone?
Juana, do you trust Julio?
Andrea entrusted it to me for safekeeping until we could bring it to Mr. Pedro. They're going to lose that money because of me. I feel awful.
In love with Ramon.
Every Monday evening, we take you back where the action happened.
We cheer up your Monday blues.
Our cameras rove all week to cover the latest in the enormous showbiz scene.
We show you what you missed even if you were present.
Grapevine gives 100% support to the local entertainment content.
From celebrity buzz,
music,
fashion,
and all manner of entertainment and youth talent.
Watch Grapevine every Monday at 10 p.m.
Remember what they say, if you did not see it on Grapevine, then it most probably
it never happened.
What you gotta do.
The reforms we are carrying.
Well, welcome back to Sports this morning. I am Daniel Wahome. We'll be getting into football with Tiras Abayaki Thuku, and our sign language interpreter is Susan Thuku. So, kind of a tongue twister. But right now, let's join the Cabinet Secretary for Agriculture, Peter Munya, who is addressing the country at the moment.
2nd May 2020. Having gone through all the necessary processes, including stakeholder consultations and public participation, the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Fisheries and Cooperatives has since given all tea sector players sufficient time, indeed more than 2 months, to familiarize themselves with the new regulatory requirements and to create their own internal implementation capacity. And therefore, I want to announce now that having given them all that time, I want to announce that the tea industry regulations are now ready for implementation. I have seen this before. The journey on which we are embarked in the tea industry is driven by the government's unwavering commitment to address the persistent problems that have bedeviled the sector. Eroded smallholder incomes and undermined sector growth. These regulations, shortly to be followed by a new Tea Act currently before Parliament, are only one of the many measures that the government will implement to reverse the dwindling fortunes of the tea sector in Kenya and to improve the entire value chain. As you may recall, this reform process was initiated on the 14th January 2020 by His Excellency the President through a raft of directives and commitments on managing and improving the tea value chain. Those directives were intended to eliminate sector inefficiencies, improve transparency, and enhance sector governance, and raise the earnings of small-scale tea farmers. His Excellency the President was emphatic that tea reforms are to address all aspects of the sector. That includes the operations and mandate of the key players in the value chain. The Kenya Tea Development Agency, team buyers, and team brokerage, as well as the entire tea auction system. These measures were meant to ensure that the primary stakeholders, tea farmers, get fair and decent earnings from both their labor and investments. The specific issues that His Excellency the President directed the Minister to address were as follows: A, corruption and exploitation of farmers, as well as conflict of interest in the management of the tea value chain. B, the reform of the value chain in order to increase revenues to farmers as opposed to middlemen and other interested parties. C, the problem of falling earnings for farmers and related issues of inefficiencies in the tea value chain. D, the challenge of low tea prices, delayed payments, low initial payments, and fluctuating net earnings to farmers. E, the governance weaknesses in the whole subsector, including but not limited to conflict of interest in the operations of KTDA and its subsidiaries. F, the lack of transparency and opaqueness in the management of KTDA subsidiaries and on the declaration of dividends to farmers. G, the persistent problems of exploitation of tea farmers by persons who are not tea growers, commonly known as Sokohuru or Mukogoro, who buy tea from farmers on cash basis and sell it to tea factory limited companies. And H, the challenge of inefficiencies at the tea auction and in the application of the sale of tea by private treaty, commonly known as direct sales overseas. And I, the problem of low valuation of Kenyan tea destined for export. So one of the principal aims of these regulations is to set the tea industry value chain on a transparent, accountable, competitive, and profitable path to empower farmers, to create sector accountability, and to give farmers incentives to improve their crop through improved earnings and greater decision-making power. The roadmap for implementation and the schedule of the new requirements that players must comply with start today. The schedule has 3 milestones. The first milestone is what must happen immediately, and this covers all the requirements that can be complied with immediately. The second milestone is 1st November 2020, and this relates to requirements that need some internal reorganization in the operations of the tea value chain players. The third and final milestone is the 28th February 2021 for those requirements that involve the reorganization of the governance and operational structures of key stakeholder organizations. The detailed implementation matrix is this statement, and I urge all stakeholders to familiarize themselves with it. My expectation is that the implementation of the Crops Tea Industry Regulations 2020 will be fully executed by 28 February 2021. Particular attention should be paid to the provisions requiring renegotiation and amendment of the current agreements. Ladies and gentlemen, as we set out to implement the new regulations, I wish to affirm that the timelines in the implementation roadmap shall be strictly enforced. There will be penalties for failing to comply with the requirements. These penalties include suspension, revocation, or variation of licenses and registration certificates. The most egregious violations will attract charge and prosecution under the Crops Act and the tea regulations. in recognition of the Mombasa Tea Auction as a principal market, entry vehicle, and price discovery mechanism for the tea industry, I hereby direct the Agriculture and Food Authority to immediately undertake a technical evaluation of the newly installed e-auction system with a view to ensuring that it is operating in line with best practices.
He's speaking at Kilimio House, where he is issuing the new guidelines that will be in charge of the tea industry. There have been cries that at times the tea industry has not been well managed. Farmers complaining about payments, not understanding the so-called bonus system. So the new tea industry regulations that are going to come into force. And we shall bring you that story in our bulletin. It's time for us to get into conversation about football, and we are joined by Teres Wayaki. Teres, a very good morning to you. First of all, yes. Saturday.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah.
So on Saturday, KBC remained the true sports partner, got the country fixed on Arsenal against Chelsea, and this was the FA Cup final. And Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang with 2 goals for Arsenal, cancelling Christian Pulisic, who had scored earlier for Chelsea, 2-1, and they won the FA Cup for a 14th time. Number 14, pushing Arsenal to a 14th title. Your take on the overall performance, first of the Arsenal side in that game?
First of all, thank you for having me, and thank you for televising the FA Cup this year. We used to do that in my time quite a bit. And definitely it was a thrilling match, and the build-up to it obviously got a bit disrupted because of the COVID-19, and so the FA Cup, for the much more senior sides, which kicks off proper, arguably, in January, was put on a bit of a freeze, and then they came back. Arsenal clawing their way to the final. The FA Cup seems to be Arsenal's strength. It brings out their strengths properly, unlike other tournaments. And then Chelsea, wow, who would have expected them to make the final? A new manager in Frank Lampard. Obviously, Arsenal also had a new manager, but he's well schooled because he's been tutored under much more prolific and experienced coaches like Pep Guardiola. Frank Lampard is pretty much a spring chicken, if you like, where football management is concerned. So it's baptism by fire for him. But he's done pretty well, and I really enjoyed that encounter. The problem with Chelsea, and I think why they didn't win this, is a lack of experience, and also tied to that is they lost their identity. They started playing like Arsenal, fast-paced football, and that's not their prowess.
I want to come to that because there are some things that have got to be mentioned. First of all, Mateo Kovacic was sent off, and then you can think of the injuries, that they suffered there. A first-half injury to Azpilicueta, and also Pulisic having to leave the field of play. How much did this change, Frank Lampard's approach to the game? Having to play, you've got to play with 10 men at one point. In the game, you've got to play with 10 men. Plus, you've lost 2 players to injury.
Obviously, Kovacic, perhaps even the red card was a blessing in disguise because he wasn't having a good outing out there. Those were clear-cut fouls that he committed. I think the nerves did strike in, and he had a pretty heavy workload. He was dealing with major traffic coming his way from the Arsenal troops. So maybe that was a blessing in disguise. But of course it did set Frank Lampard a step or two backwards. And obviously Pulisic coming off, massive blow because he was like one of the main stars of the match, at least even on the Chelsea side if you look at it. So yes, those setbacks were there, but such things will always be there in a game of football. A much more experienced side would be able to cope with that kind of situation. They'll be able to slow down the pace, deal with their tempo within their own given strengths. But they had already, even prior to these incidents taking place, gone out of breath because they were running too much, trying to play Arsenal's game, trying to match Arsenal, and that's not really the Chelsea style of play. And if they want to adapt that as a new style, a new format, it's going to take quite a bit of time because it's not their footballing philosophy. So it was all in a day's work, to be honest.
I hope they don't make a movie about him, the Americans, but he's the first American player to score a goal in an FA Cup final. Pulisic, how much talent does this young man have who left high school in the US, went to Germany, and is now in the Man League in the UK?
And what a goal that was, the build up to it. It was all Pulisic. 1, 2, 3, up to a zillion, if you like. A, B, C, up to Z, if you like. It was him who made the run right from midfield, dished out the ball, kept on running off the ball, and then placed himself strategically enough to receive the ball, cut in, and then sort of just chip the ball to his left. That was absolutely brilliant, because by cutting in, he pulled out the Arsenal goalkeeper to this side, and then all he had to do was cut the ball back in, or rather outwards, and it was all the way in. That was a brilliant goal. What does the future hold for him in terms of prospects? Let's not get carried away. I mean, we've seen so many promising young players who sort of hit their prime at their younger stages, and then as they advance, they sort of lose that rhythm. They lose their mojo. And I wouldn't get carried away with him, but I'll say this, he's a man to watch. So as Mason Mount. I mean, the entire Chelsea squad is lovely to look at, young, brilliant, gifted. It's just that experience, that exposure at this stage was a bit too much for them.
And something odd about that game, in the second half, there was only one shot on target, Emeric's goal. Basically, when it comes to the finals, where is the mentality, to stop being cagey about the way you approach things?
It all happened in the tempo. It was a seesaw of events. Now, Chelsea get the ball, they run at Arsenal. Arsenal disarmed them in Chelsea's, what they are left to the final third to conquer Chelsea. Arsenal disarmed them. Arsenal now on the attack, going. They get to the final third to clear the business. Chelsea disarmed them. So it's a game that lost character, but I would put that down to Chelsea's lack of an identity in this particular final.
It's the third time you've said that.
That's how they play. Arsenal, that's how they play. Arsenal, they can run all day. They can run rings all around you. They play very good attacking football on the day, brilliant football. But because of this back and forth, the final ball, that kicking of that final ball became a bit of an issue. And it's no wonder that it happened in the second half. Why? Because both sides were now tired. And we get there, we lose the ball. Concentration is low. Once you're tired, everything, it's not just the body, even up here, is pretty low. But I'd like to think that Pepe had a pretty much decent first and second half. He's one guy who didn't run out of steam. So it all comes down to Chelsea having lost an identity, and they're playing their opponent's game.
You've said that 4 times. Chelsea lost their identity. Well,
I'll say the 5th time.
Now, let's move on to the Serie A. Came to a close this weekend. Juventus, 83 points winners, just a 1 point difference between them and Inter Milan. And Atalanta, making their impact felt in the Serie A. Lazio, Roma, Milan, Napoli, that's all the way down to the 7th. Every time there's a club that's promoted and comes into play, somebody seems, to ruffle the feathers of, what would be called the establishment, like they call themselves. Atalanta, how much of a challenge have they presented to this season in the Serie A? And Juventus, not the best of seasons for them, despite being now winners once again.
Well, there's always a dark horse in every tournament, and this season, Atalanta provided that edge in as far as Serie A football is concerned. Terrific run, even in the UEFA Champions League, it's all Atalanta. Everyone's talking about them and saying, do you know what, this might just be the team. I even saw someone comment on social media, Twitter to be precise, and someone said pretty much what you've just said. Atalanta is a side and a half to watch. Well, they presented a formidable challenge, and it's not just them. Can you believe this? I never thought there'd come a time when we'd put AC Milan within that sort of context of a dark horse as well. But yes, they were also like dark horses of this tournament.
And Roma too.
And Roma too. But especially AC Milan for me, because they were the kings of the catwalk not too long ago. The UEFA Champions League, Club World Cups, the Serie A, the Italian Cup.
They were the original Galactico club.
They were the side to beat, the side no one wanted to meet. And obviously they've had fortunes change for them over the years. But this time under Gennaro Gattuso, we saw them coming in as a dark horse of the Serie A and doing pretty well. So Atalanta were the head of that pack that had AC Milan and AS Roma as well. You've mentioned Juventus, and they've won it, but not that convincingly. It's the age factor, pretty much what's happening at FC Barcelona. They have young players, but some of their most key players are on the other side of the hill, and they are now saying goodbye to football. They've had their best days, although they are defying that. And it's incredible that they are able to do so. We're talking Cristiano Ronaldo here, Gianluigi before. It's Chiellini also, although he's missed out on quite a few. But yes, it's the age factor, and they need to handle their succession now. It's a bit late, but they need to handle their succession now before things start going the FC Barcelona way for them.
And talk about succession, you know, Buffon really wants to play another season trying to go for that UEFA Champions League winners medal. It seems to evade him all the time. Does he have the capacity to push another year like we saw with the Samuel Hadari, who retired at 47?
Well, he does, but what enables that is the fact that he's a goalkeeper. There's not too much running for him. But now there's a catch-22 for that. The mind, reflex. Even I noticed that my reflex in day-to-day life as I walk is not as quick as it once was. Because what happens is you don't age just on the outside, the physical side, what everyone can see, and that sort of thing, and your hair starts going grey. You're also aging on the inside. So mentally, his reflex may be put under the spotlight because I don't think he's as quick as he once was, but it's for him to prove anyway.
Now, I want to move away from our club football and that, but you know, there is a relief fund that last week was approved by the Bureau of the FIFA Council. Basically, these are the 6 confederation presidents: South America, North America, Africa, Asia, Europe, and Oceania. They meet together with the FIFA President Gianni Infantino, and they passed a COVID relief fund of $1.5 billion overall. Well, we've got to take, but because I know for time constraints, it's not going to be there. First of all, interest-free loans of up to $5 million available to an FA, and also $500,000 specifically for women's football, and there is a grant of $1 million to protect and restart football. Let's talk about those figures at the moment and their implication and the temptation that may come to member associations.
Well, it's always good to say we are going to give out this much and this much and this much, and good that they're including women in their figures. But the thing is, as you've more or less put it, the accountability factor, especially when it comes to African federations. I think my predecessor who was on this seat, and you were asking him questions, the former military man.
Colonel Randiek.
Yes. He did tell you, Africa, we have a bit of a problem when it comes to discipline. Well, it's not just outward discipline. Fiscal discipline is a big issue for us. And it's not the first time that FIFA have dished out money. The question is, will this money trickle down to the footballer, the African footballer who is an amateur player? He's got his football as the main dish, or maybe even a side dish, and then he's got his side hustle, which is actually something that he cannot do without. Now, will that money get to him? Will that money get to her as well? Because we are looking at the women's football as well. That is the elephant in the room, and that has always been the elephant in the room where African football is concerned. Money is not trickling down to the person who sweats it out there, kicking those balls, and especially in this COVID-19 era. Money is the key driving force. People need money because it could be a rainy day anytime. You could fall sick, you need some medication, you need money to sort out your rent, you need money I mean, it's money, 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 money. Now, will those monies, and it's a lot of money, we're looking at 221 member states of FIFA sharing that entire $1.5 billion US dollars. It's still a lot of money divided by 221. I mean, do the math.
The case of Kenya is 150 million shillings as we speak.
That's not bad money, to be honest. If well shared out and reaches down to the Wanjiko, that's good money to push we're in August now. It can help push them towards the Christmas festivities and stuff like that, because we don't know when football in Africa resumes proper.
All right. Well, hopefully we hope to see it resume in this month, and this is for the CAF Champions League and Confederation Cup semi-finals and final. Thank you very much, Tiras. We've got to leave. My name is Daniel Wahome. Thank you for being with us over the past 2 hours, and on behalf of our sign language interpreter, Susan Thuku, and the team that put this together, I want to wish you a very good afternoon. Timothy Kiptum is coming up next with Tamrini, and as we leave, here is the detailed explanation of how the $1.5 billion from FIFA is going to be distributed to the nations across the world. Good afternoon.
COVID-19 has impacted all of us, and like every part of the global economy, football has been heavily affected. At FIFA, we immediately set to work on a relief plan that could help football in its hour of need. FIFA launched an extensive outreach to all of its member associations and worked in close cooperation with the confederations. In the first phase of the plan, the maximum amount of FIFA forward operational cost entitlements to member associations was released. For the second phase, member associations have now been given the ability to transform remaining FIFA forward development project grants into COVID-19 operational relief funds. Now we have approved Stage 3, making up to a total of $1.5 billion available to the worldwide football community, with specific protection for women's football, and financed from FIFA's financial reserves. There are 2 parts to this: grants and loans. A universal solidarity grant of $1 million is available to every member association for use in the wider football community. In addition, there is a $500,000 grant available specifically allocated to women's football. Every member association can apply for a loan with a minimum entitlement of $500,000 and a maximum of $5 million. These are interest-free and secured against future FIFA funding entitlements. Repayment schedules would commence once the COVID-19 challenge is behind us, with long-term and flexible conditions. In addition, every confederation will receive a grant of $2 million and will be able to access a loan of up to $4 million. All funds from the relief plan will be subject to a robust governance model supervised by a newly appointed steering committee. In total, the COVID-19 relief plan in 3 stages will make $1.5 billion available. This swift and significant action reflects our commitment to our member associations, to the confederations, and to the game in these challenging times.
When we moved from analog to digital, we took the opportunity to share our talanta. And the rise of local radio represented our voices mtaani. And now, in these difficult times, free educational shows are helping our children learn from home.
Mawasiliano kwetu, nguvu kwako. Communications Authority of Kenya. Opening your world. Tonight on KBC Channel 1.
It's a different ball game. Online concerts, album releases, and virtual parties.
That's the new norm in the entertainment scene.
Corona or no corona, lazima test.
Rock and roll on Grapevine.
Every Monday at 10 p.m.
Hali imekuwa ngumu, hakuna pesa kila kona, kila mtu unamdai naye anasingizia corona.
Hamjambo Wakenya wenzangu. Mimi ni Mheshimiwa Mize. Ninalotaka kuambia ni kuwasihi ya kwamba corona iko. Na ili tupigane nayo na tuishinde. Ukikohoa, tafadhali kama una ile ya kujifunika ile tissue, weka mkono hapa. Kama ni chafya yako acho na itabakia pale pale. Kama ni kukohoa yako koholea hapo. Na nakwambia tukizingatia sheria na tuitii, hii corona tutaishinda na nchi yetu tutarudi kama kawaida.
Kitambulisho hicho ni ishara tosha kwamba ni wakati wa Tamrini ya Channel 1. Ni furaha iliyoje kujumuika nawe tena kwenye kipindi hiki maarufu zaidi baada ya kuwa kwenye likizo fupi. Ishara tosha kwamba tayari nimewasi ukapera kirasmi. Mtazamaji, nimerejea kwa kishindo kuhakikisha kwamba gurudumu hili katu haliendi segemnege, na natumai uliweza kumakinika alipokuwa akichukua usukani mwenzangu Gladys Mungai ambaye aliweza kuendesha kipindi hiki nilipokuwa kwenye likizo. Karibu kwa moyo mkunjufu. Tumekuandalia mengi kwenye Tamrini, ikiwemo swala zima la janga la COVID-19, hali halisi hapa nchini, ikizingatia kwamba kuna mgomo ambao unanukia kutoka kwa chama cha wauguzi hapa nchini kinachoongozwa na katibu mkuu wake Seth Panyako, na vile vile swala zima la ugavi wa mapato ambao vile vile umeibua zogo hapa nchini. Tutakuwa nazamia masuala haya. Nitakuwa nazungumza na Isaya Ogola ambaye ni mguzi wa binafsi hapa katika gatuzi la Nairobi. Hali kadhalika Frank Swanya ambaye ni kiongozi wa vijana, alihudumu kwa wakati mmoja kama kiongozi katika chuo kikuu cha Egerton. Lakini mambo ya kwanza lazima yafanyike kwanza, tuangazie shajara ya wanahabari. Mtazamaji karibu, naitwa Timothy Kipnusu, mfasiri wa lugha ya ishara. Kwenye kulia kiombo chako ni Susan Thuku. Zungumza nasi kupitia mitandao ya kijamii kwenye kurasa yetu wa Facebook KBC Channel 1, kwenye Twitter @KBC Channel 1. Moja kwa moja tunaangazia yanayotukia kwa sasa. Waziri wa Kilimo Peter Munya anazungumzia kuhusiana na uzalishaji wa chakula hapa nchini. Hebu tumsikize.
Seek permits when already the sugar is in the market or it's already here. So we put in regulation to ensure that it is just those quantities that are required for the market that are allowed into the market through a very rigorous process where quantities are determined in advance, and we don't overshoot the quantities that are required within the market. And that is the work of the regulator, who is SAFA, whom we have directed to strictly comply with the regulations. Yes? I think that's the other misunderstanding that is there. KTDA went to court to stop the committee that are appointed to help me work out other reforms, because the reforms are not just the regulations. There are many other reforms that are required in this sector. And this committee was an implementation committee that was supposed to support the minister, engage with the stakeholders, and also support the implementation. They did not stop the regulations. The orders given were to stop the committee from doing its work. We have already gone to court to challenge those orders. So we believe a fair court is going to look into this matter and make sure that the committee is allowed to carry on with its work. So we challenge the orders. We think those orders are completely unreasonable. If somebody goes to court to seek orders to stop a committee, and he says under certificate of urgency, I don't know why a court would give orders that operate between July, August, and September if those matters were urgent. So it's curious that a court would handle a matter that is declared by whoever went to court as urgent, and yet give orders that run up to September. Because matters that are declared urgent, and the court declared that matter as urgent, are supposed to be addressed expeditiously. So why a court would give 3 months for submission for submission by parties in the matter is curious. So it's a very strange orders, because matters that are urgent, and therefore once a court declares a matter is urgent, it's supposed to be handled on a day-to-day basis immediately after the party that has gone to court. So this particular court gave orders and said we give submissions, and then the court will express itself in September. Then how urgent is that matter? What motivated the court to give those orders that ran for 3 months? Clearly, the intention is to stall the process, the reform process that we have undertaken. Luckily, the reforms are already on board. The regulations are in force, and we have already started enforcing them. And this meeting was actually to announce to everybody who is a player in this sector to comply strictly with the regulations. Whereas we comply with the court orders and stopped the committee from proceeding with its work, the orders are nothing to do with the regulations. The orders were about that committee, which we, as far as we are concerned, was properly appointed and within the law. I appointed the committee under the Crops Act, which gives me powers to appoint a committee. And the committee was supposed to support me in the process of working out reforms that would soon be evaluated under the law. So I don't see what was illegal about those orders. Indeed, a matter of that nature, I would have expected the court not to give ex parte orders, but to also require us to give our submissions before it gave the freezing order. So it's a curious process, and that's why we have said we would also like the courts to be sensitive to the needs of the Kenyan public. We have sometimes courts that operate as if they are not part of the society. I am sure every Kenyan knows the suffering that the tea farmers have gone through over the years, and I would expect the courts also to be supportive in terms of helping resolve the issues that are affecting the farmers, instead of continuing to support the status quo that has been abandoned on the tea, especially the small-scale tea farmer in this country. Be that as it may, we have complied with the court orders, but we are moving on with the reforms under the law as we wait for the court to give its ruling. Any other question? Thank you very much.
Mtazamaji, bila shaka ni picha za moja kwa moja kutoka jumba la kilimo, ambaye amekuwa akizungumza ni waziri wa kilimo Peter Munya kuzungumzia marekebisho ambayo inatarajiwa kuweza kuanzishwa katika sekta ya majani chai. Kumbuka kwamba sekta hiyo imekumbwa na hali ya mshike hapa na pale, baadhi ya wakulima wakilalama kuhusiana na bei duni na kukosa soko mazao hayo ya majani chai. Tutakuwa tunapata mengi zaidi na mwanahabari wetu ambaye yuko pale, ambaye anafuatilia matukio jinsi yanavyotukia. Kwa sasa tuweze kuangazia zogo ambalo linaendelea kwa sasa. Jamii ya wafanyabiashara hapa katika gatuzi la Nairobi limeweza kuandaa kikao kuzungumzia ugavi wa mapato ambao umeibua tumbo joto hapa nchini. Hebu tusikize wanachokisema.
A high percentage of residents of the said counties have been objected to high poverty levels because resources for development services are directed elsewhere to other communities with lesser population. And if you realize, I don't know how they rationalize this, because for us to get a good jet for money to be given to those counties, if you go there and you ask what these 40 billion shilling have done, actually, UDA has done about 10%. All the rest of the money, they use it in recurrent expenditure and, of course, corruption. There are high unemployment levels for the locals in Nairobi and neighboring counties. Poor roads and drainage facilities, inadequate lighting systems in the neighborhoods and estates, poor waste collection and management services. All these sectors require more resources. Nairobi County and its neighboring counties produce high tax collection of revenue compared to other counties because of the dense population conducting their businesses, dual industries, many small SMEs, and developing companies. Therefore, in return, the said counties should receive an equitable share of the national resource, unlike the current uneven distribution. Collection of revenue is vital, which will result in economic development for the locals, co-funding development projects, hence an increasing need for the county government to collect revenue to face the increasing expenditures budgeted for, as well as promoting efficiency in service delivery. The Nairobi business community, therefore, urges the Nairobi County Senator, Honorable Johnson Sakaja, I understand these days is called Sarakasi, Honorable Sarakasi, to vote for the new revenue sharing formula. And this one does not only apply to Sakaja. We appeal to members of NASA who have agreed to work with the government, all the members of Jubilee Senate. We are expecting them to vote.
Na mtazamaji, ni picha za moja kwa moja kutoka kwenye eneo la Sacred hapa jijini Nairobi. Ni chama cha wafanyabiashara hapa kwenye gatuzi la Nairobi ambao wanazungumzia ugavi wa mapato, wakionekana kuunga mkono kuhusiana na janga au swala hili la ugavi wa mapato. Bila shaka wamemsuta seneta wa gatuzi la Nairobi Johnson Sakaja kwa kuendelea kutoa wito kwa Wakenya au baadhi au maseneta kutopitisha mswada huo, hoja hiyo ambayo inapendekezwa na Irungu Kang'ata ambaye ni kiongozi walio wengi katika bunge la Senate. Kumbuka kwamba ni maoni yao na sio ya shirika hili la utangazaji la KBC kuhusiana na zogo hilo la ugavi wa mapato. Turejee hapa studioni kama nilivyodokeza hapo awali, mtazamaji, tutakuwa nazungumzia kuhusiana na swala hilo la ugavi wa mapato. Kumbuka kwamba mihemko za hisia zinaendelea kuibuliwa kutoka kwa viongozi kuhusiana na ikiwa serikali au maseneta wanastahili kupitisha hoja hiyo. Kumbuka kwamba watakuwa wanaweza kujadili hoja hiyo hapo kesho kuhusiana na ugavi wa mapato. Tutakuwa nazungumzia swala hilo. Niko na Isaya Ogola ambaye ni muuguzi, na vile vile kama nilivyodokeza nina Frank Swanya ambaye bila shaka ni mmoja wa viongozi wa vijana hapa kwenye gatuzi la Nairobi. Nianze na Isaya Ogola, manake uko kwenye mstari wa mbele katika kupambana na janga la COVID-19 na baadhi tu ya wale ambao wamekuwa wakishinikiza kuhusiana na ugavi wa mapato. Vile vile katibu mkuu wa chama cha wauguzi Seth Panyako akisema kwamba wanahitaji fedha za kutosha. Na swala hili pengine wewe kama muuguzi ambao uko kwenye mstari wa mbele kupambana na janga unaliona kivipi?
Kwa kweli wazo hilo linatuhusu sana sisi kama wauguzi, kwa sababu tuko katika mstari wa mbele, tunapitia hali ngumu, na wakati mwingine unapata kwamba ili kufika labda kazini, kushughulika, kwa sababu unajitoa kwa hiari yako, kwa sababu pale unaenda kutana na mgonjwa, hujui hali yake kwa namna gani. Na sasa wakati kuna jambo ambalo tunahitaji jinsi ambavyo tunafikiriwa, kwa sababu upande kwanza wa mapato ni jambo la muhimu sana, kwa sababu hiyo ndio ni kitu kama cha kuonyesha pongezi kwa ile kazi ambayo tunafanya, kwa sababu hali saizi si hali nzuri, kwa sababu unapoenda nyumbani, umetoka kazini, umepitia hali ngumu, na pale nyumbani kuna watu ambao wanakutegemea, na labda wewe ni mzazi, labda pia unashughulikia watu wengine, kuna hali pia ya kujikimu siku hizi, kuna mambo kama chakula, kuna kulipia nyumba, na mambo hayo saizi yamekuwa juu, nauli imepanda, si kama zamani. Sasa wakati tunaona kwamba tuko katika pale, ni kama tuko katika janga, na katika janga hili unahitaji kitu ya kukusaidia, na jambo hili linatokana na mapato tunayopata. Sasa wakati tunapozungumzia kuhusu jambo hilo, kuongezwa kwa mapato au sisi kupata mapato hayo, ni jambo ambalo linatusaidia sisi binafsi.
Naam. Pengine maoni yako ni yapi Swanya kuhusiana na swala hili la ugavi wa mapato?
Okay, nashukuru sana kwa kunialika katika studio zenu hii leo. Maona yangu kulingana na magavi ya mapato ni kuwa nchi yetu ya Kenya is one country. Na sisi wote kila ambacho kinafaa kuwa Kenya, it's like ni kama keki. So kila mtu anafaa kupata equitable shares. Hiyo ni according to the chapter 12 ya constitution ya Kenya, inatuelezea kuwa county zote zinafaa kuwa allocated fedha equally unless the government decide ku allocate other resources to those county governments. So mimi kitu na suggest hii bill ya Irungu Kang'ata iweze kutupiliwa mbali, na kwamba na ikiwa kama inaweza pita, then serikali kuja up na committee ambayo inaweza kushughulikia mambo na maendeleo kama vile barabara, because tukisema kuwa hii bill ipite, one vote one shilling, hiyo ina maana kuwa kuna watu wale wa Turkana huko, watu wa sehemu za Kisii, wao watabaki wakiumia, ilali hii Kenya sote tunaishi kama ndugu. Ndio maoni yangu. Na
pengine nikirejea kwako Isaya Ogola, umezungumzia vile swala hili na maoni pengine kuhusiana na alichokisema Swanya kwamba ugavi wa mapato unapotolewa au ukiweza kujadiliwa na wale maseneta waweze kuhakikisha kwamba serikali za county au county isikuwa ni kwamba wanachukua kwamba ni idadi ya watu, bali waangalie uchumi wa county binafsi, kama alivyodokeza hapo jana gavana wa gatuzi la Turkana ambaye vile alikuwa kwa wakati mmoja mwenyekiti wa baraza la magavana. Kwa mtazamo wako, tugawe pesa hizi au ugavi wa mapato uweze kuangazia kiwango cha uchumi wa county binafsi au idadi ya watu ambao wako kwenye county hiyo?
Mimi ningesema kwamba kwa maoni yangu ingefaa sana kuangalia idadi ya watu, kwa sababu ukichukua katika mfano wa kama hospitali, unapokuwa na sehemu ambayo kuna watu ni wengi, utahitaji kuwa na hospitali ambayo iko na hiyo uwezo wa kushughulikia watu hao, kwa sababu hutachukua, labda tuchukue mfano kwa zile hospitali zile za chini, kwa kimombo dispensary, hutapatia dispensary fedha nyingi sana, ilhali labda kuna kama tuseme kama Kenyatta, uwezi patia sawa. Basi tutakuja basi pale kwa idadi, kuna labda counties nyingine ambazo watu ni wachache, alafu uhitaji wao pia ni mdogo. Sasa haitakuwa na jambo la maana kujaza pesa pande moja, na kuna wakati pale pengine ambapo kuna ule uhitaji. So tukienda pamoja na ile kadri ya idadi ya watu inaonyesha uhitaji, basi hiyo ni njia bora ya kufuata. Hata kulingana na janga tulio nayo sasa hivi ya corona, utaona kwamba kuna sehemu ambazo zimeathirika zaidi. Kwa mfano kama Nairobi. Hata kwa mfano wale ambao wanapatikana na ugonjwa huu ni wengi. Ukifuatilia na kama Samburu. Hasa ikiwa Samburu labda inapata mtu mmoja, Nairobi inapata watu zaidi ya 500. Utaonaje ukipatia labda milioni 10 Samburu na milioni 10 Nairobi? Ingefaa zaidi labda uongeze upande huu ambapo kuna uhitaji zaidi. Na pia lakini usisahau pia upande ule mwingine, kwa sababu huwezi jua wakati ujao, labda wakati unaweza athirika zaidi.
Sonya, umezungumzia kuhusiana na swala hili ukilenga county vile vile ambazo ziko katika maeneo kama vile Turkana ambayo ni ya mashinani. Ukiangazia pengine pendekezo la baadhi ya magavana kuhusiana na ugavi huu wa mapato kwenda mbele, ni masuala yapi ambayo lazima yaangaziwe kando na yale ambayo umesema kwamba kuwe na jopo ambalo linabuniwa baada ya pengine kama kitapitishwa, japo umesema kwamba uunge mkono ipitishwe, ili kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba kaunti zile ambazo ziko kwenye maeneo ya mashinani ambayo inakabiliwa na changamoto kama alivyodokeza mwenzangu, zina za zahanati, zina vifaa ambavyo vinaweza kushughulikia wagonjwa, hasa wakati ambapo taifa linapambana na janga la COVID-19.
Okay. So jambo ambalo mimi naweza sema ni kuwa tukisema kuwa county zisipewe hela kiusawa, ila itakuwa sawa, kwa sababu tukifikiria kama county kama vile Turkana kwa mfano. Turkana population yake tunaelewa kuwa Turkana watu ambao wanaishi Turkana watu wachache. Na population, probability ya population kuja ku rise iko low, the probability iko chini. But tukipata to share those resources equally, tupeleka resources Turkana, tupeleka resources the same resources to Nairobi, tuta-develop Turkana and as a whole Kenya. Unajua hapa saa jambo ambalo tunafaa kulizingatia ni kuwa we are supposed to develop Kenya, not supposed to develop Nairobi as a county alone or Kiambu as a county. Kitu ambao kiko sola hapa ni kuwa to develop Nairobi as a whole, yani Kenya as a whole. That's when we can go forward. We are already a third world country. Sasa tukifikiria mambo kama vile ku develop hizi counties ambazo ziko na watu wengi, watu wote watatoka mashinani wanakuja Nairobi. Kutakuwa na overpopulation, sivyo?
Asante kwa wazo lako. Ni tukiangazia changamoto ambazo mnakumbana nazo kama wauguzi. Kwa sasa tunazungumzia zaidi ya visa vya maambukizi 22,000. Hapo jana Wizara ya Afya ilitangaza visa vingine vya maambukizi 600 na zaidi. Pengine nyie kama wauguzi ambao mko kwenye mstari wa mbele kupambana na janga hili, imekuwa vipi? Hali imekuwa vipi? Je, kwanza tunafahamika kwamba kuna wale ambao tayari wameambukizwa na tayari ambao wameaga dunia kutokana na janga hili katika harakati ya kuwasaidia Wakenya. Hali imekuwa vipi, na pengine wazo lako kwenda mbele kwa serikali kuhakikisha kwamba wauguzi kui kwenye hatari ya kuambukizwa gonjwa hili?
Kwa kweli ni wakati mgumu sana. Imekuwa kusema ukweli tunaumia, kwa sababu unakuwa na ile wazo kwamba unaenda kukutana na mgonjwa kila siku. Na wakati huu huwezi ona mtu akiwa anakuja kwa umbali useme huyu anaugua ugonjwa fulani ama ugonjwa mwingine. Lazima ukae pale ushughulikie mgonjwa, na baada ya kujua utaweza kujua baadaye. Jinsi ambavyo tunaweza kusaidika ni kwa upande wa vitu ambao zinatusaidia kama equipments, PPEs. Zinapaswa kwamba ziwe kwa urahisi. Kama tunazozipata kwa urahisi, bei ya hizi vitu pia kwenda chini. Kwa mfano kama katika sekta ya ambulensi, unaona huyu ndio kwamba walio kwenye mstari wa mbele wanapatana wagonjwa hawa papo hapo. Wanaenda kwenye manyumba ya watu, wanaenda labda sehemu za kazi, mtu ameanguka chini, kwa watu tunakuja kusaidia watu kwa aina hiyo. Sasa tukiweza kupata jinsi ambavyo serikali inaweza kusaidia mfumo huu wa sekta ya ambulensi sasa, kuna kuweza kuwasaidia labda kubadilisha bei ya vitu na ikuwe rahisi kwa kuweza kuzipata kwa urahisi, kwa sababu hiyo ndio mstari wa mbele wa kuweza kujikinga. Sababu tusipojikinga sisi wenyewe ambao tuko katika mstari wa mbele, tutaweza kuwakinga wenzetu namna gani? Au labda pia nikisema nihudumie mgonjwa sasa hivi, alafu na nikose kuwa na magwanda haya ya kazi, baadaye itakuwaje nikihudumia mgonjwa mwingine? Maambukizi yataenda kuendelea. Hatutakuwa tunasuluhisha jambo lote, bali tutakuwa tunaongeza. Na sasa badala ya na pia katika hospitali yetu serikali inaweza paswa kuongeza mambo hayo, sababu pia hapa ndio pia pahali ambapo ugonjwa huu unaenea hata zaidi. Sababu tusipofuatilia maagizo ambayo tunapatiwa na ikue kwanza tena rahisi kwetu, kwa sababu ndio unaweza pata uko na maagizo lakini huna vitu za kufanya hiyo maagizo. Labda unaambiwa kwamba ukiwa unashughulikia mgonjwa unapaswa kuvaa magwanda haya kwa kila mgonjwa. Na je, uko na gwanda moja na unapaswa kuhudumia wagonjwa zaidi ya 5 ama
kwa serikali hakikisha kwamba kuna vifaa vya kutosha wakati wa kuhudumia wagonjwa. Una wazo kinzani au pengine kuhusiana na masuala ya kuhakikisha kwamba wale wauguzi ambao ndio wanasaidia kupambana na zimwe hili ambalo limekula na kumaliza?
Kwa hili jambo ningependa kuongezea kwa yale ambayo ndugu yangu Isaya amesema, ni kuwa wauguzi wanafaa kufadhiliwa ili waweze kusaidia wakati mgumu. Tuko katika wakati mgumu, janga hili la corona, hao wauguzi ndio watu ambao wamekuwa exposed sana. Of the recent days tumeona wauguzi wengi wameweza kufariki, wengine ni wagonjwa. So ningeiomba serikali iweze kuwasaidia wauguzi, waongeze mishahara. Serikali inaweza ikiongeza mishahara, at least wanaweza jifacilitate. Unajua unapata most of the health workers they can't even afford to buy those face masks, hizo maninizo PPEs, unanielewa? Then kitu kingine ningesema the government can also come up ikuje na like a cover, insurance cover, medical cover policy yenye inaweza kata for wauguzi au wauguzi wakati ule ambapo wanagonjeka. Because inakuwa more risky muuguzi akigonjeka, when anaenda hospitali anafaa kukata for the expenses za treatment. So jambo ambalo ningeliomba serikali iangalie hivyo, come up with a cover policy ambayo inaweza kusaidia wauguzi ambao wataambukizwa specifically ugonjwa huu wa corona.
Unasema nini wewe ni muuguzi Isaya? Wazo lake Swanya unaliunga mkono, na vile vile kumekuwa na vile mdahalo au pendekezo kutoka kwa baadhi ya wale viongozi wa vyama vya wafanyikazi kama vile chama cha wauguzi Seth Panyako kuhusu kwamba kuwepo na tume maalum ambayo itakuwa inashughulikia masuala yanayohusiana na afya. Wazo lako ni lipi?
Kwa jambo hilo kusema kweli itakuwa jambo lenye kusaidia sana. Kukiwa na tume ambayo inashughulikia jambo hilo, itakuwa rahisi hata kwa wauguzi wenyewe kuweza kueleza mambo ambayo wanakabili. Na sasa kukiwa na tume hiyo itaweza kutushughulikia moja kwa moja. Kwa sababu hapo ni tume hilo inaelewa wauguzi, inajua shida za wauguzi ni gani, na pia wako pale na sisi katika tunasema kwenye grounds, wako pamoja nasi. So wakati tunapoeleza kwamba labda unasema unahitaji jambo fulani, hata kama ni insurance, ataelewa ni kwa nini inatakikana. Na pia kwa sababu sisi tu ambao tuko kazini, ndio tuko kazini, lakini tuna familia wanatutegemea sisi. Sasa ikiwa jambo likitufanyikia, nani atawahudumia? Labda wewe ndio peke yako unashughulikia, itakuwa namna gani? So tume kama hizi zinafaa sana ili ziweze kutatua matatizo ambazo tuko nazo. Kwa sababu kama wakati huu mguzi atakuwa na wakati wa kwenda kuzunguka kila wakati, kama ni jambo hili la mgomo. Si hatutaki kama kwenda mgomo. Tunataka kufanya kazi kuhudumia wagonjwa. Sasa tukiwa na tume kama hizi itaweza kutushughulikia isifike kiwango hiyo ya kuweza labda kuacha kazi kwa sababu tunaugua ama tunateseka kwa jambo moja lingine. Sasa hii itaweza kutushughulikia, itakuwa kama umbrella kwa ajili yetu. Na ndio kwa maana tuna hata hizi bill ambazo jaribu kufuatiliwa, zingine kama bill ya paramedics, na ili iweze kama bunge iliweze kuchukua jambo hilo na kuweza kuchukua kwamba, kwa sababu hata tukiwa kama wauguzi unapaswa kuwa na uko na ile qualifications, unafanyia mgonjwa wako jambo ambalo linafaa. Si tu wewe ni muuguzi kusema wewe ni muuguzi.
Swanya, kuhusiana na vile swala la umezungumzia mishahara, na kwa kweli kumekuwa na mapendekezo vile kuhusiana na kuimarisha mishahara kwa wauguzi na wale ambao wamekuwa kwenye mstari wa mbele. Kumbuka kwamba gavana wa gatuzi la Machakos Alfred Mutua aliweza kutoa ile pesa zaidi ya marupurupu kwa wahudumu wa afya katika gatuzi hilo la Machakos. Kwenda mbele itakuwa kwamba tuweze kufanyia marekebisho tume ya kutathmini mishahara yakikisha kwamba wauguzi wanalipwa pesa zaidi hata kuliko wanasiasa. au wazo lako ni lipi? Na vile vile kuhusiana na tume hiyo ambayo itakuwa inashughulikia wauguzi, kwamba kuna kama tume ya huduma za mahakama GSC ambayo inashughulikia masuala ambayo inahusu mahakama na majaji, masuala kama hayo, na vile vile kuna tume ya huduma za bunge PSC, na vile vile kuna tume ya kuajiri walimu TSC. Wazo lako ni lipi?
Wazo langu hapo kia eneo hili hasa katika hilo wazo la mshahara kwa wauguzi walipo hata zaidi kuliko wanasiasa.
Naam.
Siwezi sema kuwa nataka labda wauguzi walipo zaidi kuliko watu fulani hivi, lakini jambo ambalo naweza sema wauguzi ni watu wa maana sana katika jamii. They are the people ndio wanashikilia maisha yetu. Wakati after God the next person unakuja ni muuguzi wakati ambapo umegonjeka, sivyo? So jambo ambalo ningependekeza walipwe vema ambavyo wanaweza jitosheleza mahitaji yao. Si ati ni tuseme labda ati wauguzi wanafaa kulipwa zaidi kuliko walimu. Walimu pia watakuja, si ndio tumesomesha hao wauguzi, sivyo?
Utakuwa na vuta ni kuvuta
utakuwa vuta na kuvuta. Polisi naye aseme si ndio tunawachunga. Wanielewa? So kitu ambacho ningependa kupendekeza ni kuwa wauguzi waweze kulipwa mshahara ambao waweze kulipwa vema ili waweze kujikimu kimaisha. Wako na mahitaji yao. Na unaelewa wakati huu ndio they are the people wamekuwa wakifanya kazi tangu corona ilipoingia katika nchi hadi wakati huu. So the government should appreciate them, iwaongeze mishahara na waendelea kutufanyia kazi njema jinsi ambavyo wanavyofanya.
Naam, Isaya, unasema nini kuhusiana na hali ya kujitayarisha katika taifa hili? Wewe uko kwenye sekta hii ya afya, wewe ni muuguzi, hali iko vipi, na pengine kwenda mbele itakuwa ni masuala yapi ambayo serikali inastahili kuangazia ili kwamba watu hapa nchini wasikuwa wakitegemea kwenda mataifa ya ughaibuni kutafuta huduma za afya? Pengine kama mtu ameugua ugonjwa wa saratani au ugonjwa wote ule, kwamba vifaa au viwango vya kuimarisha huduma za afya hapa nchini iweze kuwa bora zaidi. Wazo lako litakuwa lipi?
Katika hali hii, jambo la kwanza tunapoangalia mambo kama haya ni kwamba tunaangalia kwanza, je, tuko na hiyo uwezo?
Naam.
Alafu baada ya kuangalia kama tuko na uwezo, je, tuko na watu ambao wanaweza fanya jambo hili? Na katika watu hapa tunaongea kuhusu, tuko na wauguzi, tuko na the correct practitioners, kama ni watu ambao wanafanya kazi katika labs na mambo kama hayo. Je, tuko na watu wote? Ukiangalia tuko na mambo haya yote, kwa sababu ukiona hata kuna wauguzi ambao wanatoka kama nchini wanaenda nchi zingine kufanya kazi. Kwa nini?
Maana tuko na wauguzi bora au
madaktari bora na wako sawa kabisa katika kazi, wanachapa kazi vizuri. Sasa jambo hilo kwamba serikali kishaona kwamba iko na watu tayari, jambo la pili basi ni kuweza kuunga mkono hawa watu na kuwapatia zile dhana ambazo wanahitaji. Sasa kama zile equipments, na kwa sababu tayari tuko na sehemu nyingi sana, kwa sababu kama wakati huu corona ilipokuja, ni kweli ilikuja mara moja, hali ilikuwa inatazamiwa. Lakini ilipokuja hali ilikuwa namna gani? Tulingangana nayo. Na tunaona tuko na ile uwezo wa kungangana nayo. Sasa ili tuweze kusaidia Wakenya katika njia nzuri zaidi, ni kwamba wanapaswa serikali inapaswa kuingiza sasa mambo haya, kama ni hizo equipment, na kama ni kwa sababu upande wa ugatuzi isaidie sasa, kama ni hospitali kuongeza vitu ndani katika hospitali hiyo, na pia kuweza kusaidia ili tuweze na kwa wale wananchi wa chini. Kwa kuna shida inatokea labda kulipa mambo ya hospitali na mambo kama hayo. Ikiweza kusaidia wale
kuimarisha bima ya afya pengine.
Wakiwa katika hali hiyo watakuwa na ile tuseme confidence ya kuja katika hospitali. Na wakikuja katika hospitali ama kukutana na watu ambao wako wauguzi, wanajua hawa ni watu ambao pia wako sawa kabisa. Sasa afadhali wasaidie hapo na waongeze infrastructure na capacities. Kama ni badala ya kusema kama county ikuwe na vitanda 300 ya ICU, tunasema inapaswa kuongezeka hiyo zaidi. Kwa sababu watu ni wengi.
Naam. Swanya, una wazo lipi vile vile kuhusiana na swali hili? Manake ukitizama mataifa ya ughaibuni pengine na uweke Kenya kwenye darubini, tuko wapi kama taifa kuhusiana na viwango vya afya au huduma zinazotolewa, na wazo kuhusiana na kugatuliwa kwa afya iwe katika katika inaweza kumudiwa katika serikali za county na sio serikali ya kitaifa?
Naam. Kuhusu swala hili la kiafya, kama nchi Kenya tuko chini sana. Kwa sababu ukiangalia watu wengi hasa wale wagonjwa wa saratani hapo awali, si hata hapo awali, hadi sasa wakati wengi wao unapata wanaenda India, nchi za nje kwenda kutibiwa. Kwa hivyo hii inakuwa ni challenge kubwa kwetu sisi wa Kenya, kwa hasa ule Mkenya wa chini. Kwa hivyo Mkenya wa chini, tuseme Mkenya haezi hata jimudu kujimudu kimaisha. Kumwambia sasa aende nchi ya nje kupata matibabu inakuwa ni vigumu sana. Kwa hivyo jambo ambalo ningependa kuhimiza serikali ni kuwa wakati janga hili la corona limetupata, unaona ndio tunaongeza mavitanda kwa hospitali, tunaongeza sijui we have added 200 beds, we have added 300 beds.
Na vile vifaa vya kusaidia kupumua,
ventilators. What we need to do kama like what the government needs to do ni kuwa serikali ijenge hospitali. Unanielewa? Kwa sababu we have the doctors wako. Kuna wahudumu wengi, hata wengine hawana makazi. Hilo ndio jambo ningependa kuhimiza serikali yetu invest in healthcare. Yeah.
Na kuhusiana na kupambana na janga hili, pengine Ogolla, una wazo lipi? Kumekuwa na pendekezo kwamba ile kuhakikisha kwamba nyumba baada ya nyumba ile wanayoita home care inaweza idhinishwa ili kwamba kuweza kupambana na janga hili. Wazo lako ni lipi, na wewe kama muuguzi swala hili litaweza kufaulu katika kuweza kudhibiti visa hivi vya maambukizi?
Kwa kweli jambo hilo litaweza kusaidia, kwa sababu ukiangalia hiyo home care ni jambo rahisi zaidi, sababu sasa ni ile kila kitu inafanyikiwa, mgonjwa anahudumiwa akiwa kwake nyumbani. Kuna mambo yale ya privacy, anakuwa na ile pia na ile confidence ya kuweza kueleza mambo yake vizuri. Alafu sasa pale nyumbani pia hata kuwa na ile uoga jinsi ambavyo, kwa sababu corona saizi watu wengi wako katika, tunasema tuko katika panic mode. Sasa mtu hajui akienda hospitali nitapata, ama mtu akiwa nyumbani asikia amekohoa kidogo niko na corona. Nikienda pale hospitali nilisema niko na joto kidogo nitaenda quarantine. Lakini sasa unaona akifanywa ile home care atakuwa na ile uwezo wa kusema hali jinsi ilivyo, na pia pale home care ataweza kushughulikiwa, kwa sababu ni wale wauguzi watakuja pale nyumbani na watamshughulikia pale nyumbani. Sasa kwa sasa serikali inapaswa pia iangalie jinsi hiyo inaweza kusaidia jinsi gani, kwa sababu kuna upande wa private sector ambayo imeanza kujaribu kufanya mambo kama haya, ambao kama hata sisi tunajaribu kufanya hivyo. Tunaenda kushughulikia wagonjwa wetu pale, tuwasaidia ili wasiweze kuja na wasisumbuke, sababu pia pale unataka pia mgonjwa kwenye ile comfort, anajihisi huru, anajihisi yako sawa, na anajua kwamba mambo yake itakuwa sawa.
Una wazo lipi kuhusiana na swala hili la kushughulikia wagonjwa pale nyumbani na kuhakikisha kwamba masuala yao ya kiafya yanaweza kudhibitiwa ili kwamba isiwe kwa umma?
Swala hili la home care mimi siliungi mkono. Kwa sababu tunavyoelewa ni kuwa ugonjwa huu wa corona ni ugonjwa ambao umekuja. Ni ugonjwa, it's a new disease. Hatujauelewa vyema. Kwa hivyo unaona kama with the living conditions zenye Wakenya tuko nao, chukulia kwa mfano vile Mathare. Kuko congested. Unapata mtu nyumba ni single room, si ndio? Next hapa ndio jirani, kitanda iko hapo karibu na jirani mwenzake. So itakuwa vigumu kusema kuwa ati huyu jirani mmoja ambaye yuko nyumbani kwake hata muambukizo jirani ambaye yuko nyumbani kwingine. Jambo ambalo ningesema ni kuwa serikali itafute njia ambayo inaweza kuwasaidia Wakenya, ifanye adequate training. Unajua hata our health workers wako at risk because they don't understand this disease even ile we can say that fully. They have knowledge of the disease, lakini ni ile hawajaielewa kabisa.
Manake ni mpya.
Ni ugonjwa mpya. Kwa hivyo itakuwa vigumu sana. Chukulia mfano wauguzi wetu hawajauelewa ugonjwa vema. What about the normal mwananchi yule ambaye yuko kijijini? Itakuwa vigumu sana yule mwananchi ambaye yuko mashinani kufanya hiyo mkia, because with the nature ambayo ya maisha yetu ambayo tumezoea, we are people wenye tunapata tuna interact sana. Unanielewa?
Pengine ameweza kutaja swala muhimu zaidi, wewe kama muuguzi, na vile vile kuhusiana na ile kiwango cha wale wauguzi kuwa na ufahamu kuhusiana na jinsi ya kukabiliana na wagonjwa ambao wameambukizwa na gonjwa hili. Je, pengine kwanza visa hivi vya maambukizi na hata vifo ambavyo vimetokea kutoka kwa wauguzi, inamaanisha kwamba kuna baadhi ya wale ambao hawakuwa na ufahamu wa jinsi ya kukabiliana na au kuhudumia wale wa Kenya wagonjwa ambao wamekuja kwenye vituo vya afya na wanastahili kuhudumiwa. Pengine ni swala la mafunzo hayatolewa vema ili kuweza kuhakikisha kwamba visa hivi havisambai au vipi? Tueleze kama muuguzi ambao huko pale katika harakati ya kupambana na janga hili.
Kabla sijafika katika sehemu hiyo, ningependa kwanza kuweza kumweleza jambo moja kuhusiana na hili wazo la home care. Wajua kwa sasa kwa nini tunafikiria hata wazo hilo? Ni kwamba upande wa hospitali tunapata hospitali kwamba zimejaa. Unaona? Na tukumbuka si corona peke yake ambayo tunashughulika nayo. Na tusiweze kuweka tu kichwa yetu katika pale corona. Kuna magonjwa mengine ambayo yako sasa na ambayo ni mengi sana. Na sasa wagonjwa hapa wanahitaji bado hile kuhudumiwa. Na sasa tukiweka tu wazo katika, ukisikia home care unafikiria ni corona peke yake. Hapana. Kuna yale magonjwa ambayo tunaweza kushughulikia mgonjwa akiwa nyumbani. Na ambao sasa
kama vile virusi vya ukimwi,
anaweza pata na dawa pale. Kama kuna wale community health workers wanaweza fanya mambo kama hayo, wanaweza fika pale kijijini pale, kama sehemu za madhari nini, hapo wanaenda kule, wanaweza kushughulikia hawa, sababu unaona hawa ni wale ambao watu wako in high risk. Wakikuja labda katika hospitali wanakuwa katika hali mbaya zaidi. Alafu kurudi katika wazo ambao ulikuwa unasema kuhusiana na mafunzo. Na kwa nini janga hili labda linapata hata wauguzi. Kusema kweli sisi wote ni binadamu. Na kama binadamu uko na ile uwezo wa kufanya jambo hadi wakati fulani. Na sasa kwa sababu mambo imekuwa, wagonjwa wamekuwa wengi. Unapata labda sasa ni labda ile mtu anachoka. Ni kawaida mtu kuchoka. Na unapochoka jambo gani linafanyika? Unakuwa na ile unasahau. Na labda hivyo ndivyo pia magonjwa yanatokea. Lakini mafunzo pia ni jambo la muhimu sana, kwa sababu kila wakati tunakuwa na ile mafunzo ya kurudia. Na sasa wakati tunarudia mafunzo haya, kwa sababu inatusaidia ili kuweza kuhudumia zaidi.
Naam, asante sana. Pengine tukiduchu tu kuhusiana na swala hili la kuimarisha huduma za afya, pengine Swanya, tukipiga darubini masuala kama haya, ukiangazia masuala kama haya uliposema hapo awali, na mataifa mawili ambayo yameweza kuweza kukabiliwa zaidi na gonjwa hili kama vile Marekani, Uchina, ni wapi hasa Kenya imeweza kuimarisha mbinu zake za kupambana na janga hili tofauti na mataifa kama hayo, na mataifa ya hapa Afrika Mashariki? Maana kumekuwa vile vile na mdahalo kwamba kuna baadhi ya wale wananchi au mataifa mengine ambayo hajakubali kwamba gonjwa hili lipo, kwamba swala hili ni swala ambalo halipo na wamelifanyia mzaha. Wazo lako ni lipi kuhusiana na swala hili?
Kuhusiana na swala hili ni kuwa nchi yetu ya Kenya imejaribu vilivyo kupigana na janga hili la corona. Hasa tukiangalia katika kaunti ya Nairobi, tukimwangalia gavana wetu, Gavana Mike Kioko Mbuvi Sonko, tumemwona amekuwa katika mstari wa mbele kupigana na janga hili. Amekuwa akisaidia in fumigation, amekuwa akisaidia wananchi wakati wa janga hili, akiwasupport, akapatia vyakula na matumizi yao. Kwa hivyo jambo ambalo ningependa kusema ni kumpongeza kwanza gavana wetu wa Nairobi, Gavana Mike Mbuvi Kioko Sonko, kwa kusaidia Wakenya na watu wa Nairobi kwa ujumla. Alafu pia nimpongeze rais wetu kwa sababu amekuwa katika mstari wa mbele kupigana na janga hili. Tumemwona rais amekuwa give out press conferences kutuelezea jinsi ambavyo nchi inaendelea. Tumekuwa tukimwona CS wetu.
Asante. Naarifu muda umetupa kisogo. Mtazamaji, kufikia hapo tuna la ziada, ila kutamatisha Tamrini Channel 1. Nimekuwa nikizungumza na Frank Swanya ambaye ni kiongozi wa vijana, na kwa wakati mmoja alihudumu kama kiongozi wa wanafunzi katika chuo kikuu cha Egerton. na vilevile nimekuwa nikizungumza na Isaya Ogola ambaye ni muuguzi ambaye vilevile anashughulikia masuala ya kidharura katika mojawapo ya hospitali hapa kwenye gatuzi la Nairobi. Asante sana kwa kuweza kutuma jumbe zako, ujumbe wako mtazamaji. Pengine niangazie moja tu. Anaitwa Emmanuel Sirma kutoka Naro Kabuson, ametuma ujumbe, anatizama na furahia kipindi. Watu hao wote sitaweza kusoma. Kuna mwingine Victor Otende na Joseph Omuka, asante sana, unatizama Tamrini. Kufikia hapo kama nilivyosema, nasema asante sana kwa kutizama. Naitwa Timothy Kipnusu, mfasiri wa lugha ya ishara. Amekuwa Susan Thuku. Asante sana kwa kutizama. Usukani kwa sasa na wacha kwake mwenzangu Bentro Enjoy akufahamisha ni ujiri katika taifa hili na mataifa ya ughaibuni. Kwaheri.
I greet you all in Jesus' name. Once again, we thank God for this opportunity that the Lord has given us just to be in His presence and to declare His goodness in the land of the living. I want us to encourage ourselves from the book of 2 Chronicles 14 and verses 11. And the Bible says that, "And Asa made prayer to the Lord his God and said, Lord, you are the one who is able to give us help against the strong army, to him who has no strength. Come to our help, O Lord our God, for our hope is in you. And your name we have come against the great army. O Lord, you are our God. Let no man's power be greater than yours." Now, I want us just to realize a few things concerning the King Asa of Israel. It was a time when there was a great